Runaway girl hid in a laundromat. From her pursuer, the owner came in. Then engines roared. Outside, Maya ran like the street was trying to swallow her. Rain slapped her face sideways, turning the neon into smeared bruises of color. Her lungs burned hot and shallow, and every time she dared to look over her shoulder, the same shape was there, steady, closing, never rushing, like he already knew she had nowhere left to go. A laundromat sign flickered ahead. Open, then dead, then open again. She didn't think. She threw herself through the glass door, and the little bell rang once, too loud, too cheerful. Then she yanked it shut with both hands and killed the light switch by the entrance. The room fell into dimness, lit only by the weak glow of the vending machine and the exit sign, green as sickness. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. She stumbled between rows of washers, water dripping off her hoodie and onto the tile in fat, betraying drops. She pressed her palm over her mouth to stop the sound of her breathing. The machines hummed softly, a constant mechanical purr that made her feel like she'd crawled into the belly of something alive. She ducked behind a stack of detergent boxes and forced herself to slow down. Count, in, out, outside, a car rolled by slow. Not a normal slow, the kind of slow that searched. Headlights slid across the laundromat windows like a blade, washed over the empty chairs, the folding tables, the silent machines. They paused. Maya shrank into herself, trembling so hard her teeth clicked. The car stopped. Silence stretched, thick and sticky. Then the headlights clicked off. She almost sobbed with relief until she heard footsteps on wet pavement. Calm footsteps, unhurried, coming toward the door. She could picture his shoes without seeing them. Clean, expensive, never slipping. The bell didn't ring. The door didn't open. Instead, the handle tested once, gentle, like a polite person checking if the place was locked. It was locked. She had locked it. The handle tested again, harder. Maya's hand shot to her pocket. The object inside was small, hard, and sharp-edged through the fabric. It had dug into her thigh for the last 10 minutes while she ran, like a reminder that she'd started this and couldn't undo it. She tightened her grip around it until pain grounded her. A shadow crossed the window. Then a voice, right outside the glass, quiet enough that it might have been meant only for her. Maya. Her blood turned to ice. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't guessed. He knew. She clamped both hands over her mouth again to keep the sound from escaping. Her eyes watered from the pressure, from the panic, from the feeling that the air itself was getting thinner. The handle stopped moving. A pause. Then a light knock on the glass. Not threatening, not aggressive, almost patient. Maya, the voice repeated softer. Open up. You're wet through. You'll get sick out here. Her mind flashed to the car, the door opening, the smell inside, the way his hand had settled on her wrist like a cuff while he smiled at her and said, "You're going to be smart now." She backed up on her knees, silent, trying to become smaller than her own body. The back door. There had to be a back door. She crawled along the floor, staying low between the machines, using the metal boxes as cover. Her fingers found the wall, then the corner, then the narrow hallway leading to what looked like a storage room. There it was, a metal door with a push bar. Hope surged so hard she almost laughed. She shoved it. Nothing. She shoved again, harder. The door didn't move. She looked down. A chain looped through the handle and a bolt in the frame. Thick, industrial, like whoever ran this place didn't trust anyone. A sob crawled up her throat. She swallowed it so violently it hurt. The knock on the front glass stopped. That was worse than the knocking, because silence meant he was doing something else. Maya listened so hard she could hear her own pulse thudding in her ears. Then, faintly, she heard a second set of sounds. Not outside. Inside. A floorboard creak. A rustle. The subtle scrape of something being set down. Her head snapped toward the storage room door beside her. It was slightly ajar, a thin black slice of darkness. She hadn't noticed it before. She hadn't checked it. Her hands went cold. The laundromat had been empty when she ran in, hadn't it? "Maya," the voice outside called again, closer now, right at the glass. "I can see you." He was lying. He couldn't see her from there, but her fear didn't care about logic. Behind her, the storage room door shifted. A figure stepped into the hallway. Maya froze. He wasn't the pursuer. Not the same posture, not the same silhouette. This man was broader in the shoulders, wearing a dark jacket, hair cut short. He held something in his hand that caught a sliver of green exit light. Keys, maybe. His face was half shadow, but his eyes found her immediately. They were calm eyes, not kind. Just calm. He looked at the chain on the back door, looked at her wet knees on the tile, looked at her hands clenched like claws. Then he spoke, quiet and controlled, like he didn't want the sound to travel. "Don't move." Maya's throat made a small broken noise. The man lifted his free hand palm down, a gesture that meant lower it, settle, breathe, like he was trying to keep an animal from bolting. "I own the place," he said. "You just broke in." I didn't." Maya's voice scraped out like sand. "Please, please don't." The front handle rattled again, harder this time. The man's head turned toward the sound. His jaw tightened slightly. The tiniest change, the first crack in the calm. He walked to the end of the hallway and peered into the main room. Maya stayed where she was, glued to the tile, afraid that if she moved she'd make noise and the wrong person would find her. The owner, if he was the owner, reached up and flicked a switch. One dim ceiling strip light sputtered on over the folding tables, leaving the rest of the laundromat in shadow. It didn't brighten the room so much as carve it into shapes. He came back toward her, and for the first time she saw his face properly. Mid-40s, tired lines around the eyes, a small scar near his eyebrow like an old mistake. His expression was blank, but not bored. Focused. "What's your name?" he asked. Maya hesitated. Her real name felt like a piece of her she couldn't afford to hand out. The handle shook again, and this time she heard the faint metallic click of something slipping, someone trying to force it. "Maya," she said, the lie already useless because the man outside had said it. The owner's eyes flicked, sharp now, calculating. "You know the guy at the door?" Maya shook her head too fast. "No, yes, I mean, he's not. Her vision blurred. She forced herself to focus. "He's looking for me." The owner stared at her for a long beat. Then he spoke like he was placing each word carefully in a row. "Why?" Maya's hand tightened around the object in her pocket. The edges bit into her palm through fabric. "Because I ran," she whispered. "Because I shouldn't have seen what I saw." The owner held her gaze. There was no sympathy there, but there was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd heard versions of that sentence before. The door handle banged again, and the glass in the front door rattled in its frame. A voice rose slightly, still polite, still smooth, still terrifying. "Sir, I know you're in there. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just open up and let me take my niece home." Maya flinched at the word niece. He'd used it before. It was his favorite costume. The owner's eyes slid to the window, then back to Maya. "That's him?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "He's lying." The owner's mouth tightened. He took 2 steps past her toward the chained back door, then stopped, listening. Not to the front, to outside, farther away. Maya listened too, and at first heard only rain. Then, faint, an engine idling somewhere nearby, not the same car at the door. Another one. She felt the room shrink. The owner noticed her noticing. "There's more than one," he murmured. Maya's breath hitched. "He doesn't come alone." The owner's posture changed then, not dramatically. Just a shift of weight, like a man settling into a decision. He leaned close enough that Maya could smell coffee on his breath and something metallic, like old tools. His voice dropped even lower. "Listen to me," he said. "If you're lying, you picked the worst place to play games." "I'm not lying," Maya rasped. "Please." His eyes held hers. "If you're not lying," he continued, "then you do exactly what I say. No noise. No running unless I tell you. No hero moves. You understand?" Maya nodded so fast it made her dizzy. He reached behind the storage room door and pulled out a mop bucket on wheels, nudging it silently to the side. Under it was a small floor hatch, the kind you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. He didn't open it yet. He just put his boot lightly on top, claiming it. Maya stared at the hatch, heart slamming. "What is that?" "A way out," he said. Then, softer, almost to himself, "Sometimes." The voice at the door became warmer, more insistent. "Sweetheart, you're scaring people. Open the door. It's okay. You're safe with me." Maya's nails dug into her palm. "Safe with me." She had believed that once, until she'd learned what safe meant to him. Quiet, obedient, disappeared. The owner stepped away from the hatch and walked into the main room. Maya stayed frozen in the hallway, half hidden by the machines, watching him through the narrow gap. He moved like he knew every inch of the place. He crossed behind the counter, reached under it, and pulled out a small black remote and a set of keys. He glanced at a corner of the ceiling. Maya followed his eyes. There was a tiny camera mounted above the detergent shelf, angled toward the door. Her stomach dropped. He'd been recording everything, or watching everything. The owner raised his voice just enough to carry. "We're closed." A pause from outside, like the pursuer had to adjust to being addressed. "Sir," the voice said, still pleasant, "I just need to grab my niece. She's not well. She ran off without her meds. I'd really appreciate it." The owner didn't answer immediately. He walked to the front door, stopping several feet away, not close enough to be grabbed if the door opened. He looked through the glass, his face unreadable. Maya couldn't see the man outside from her angle, only the outline and the wet shine of his hair under the streetlight. But she could feel him, the way you feel a storm before it breaks. The owner spoke calmly. "If she's your niece, call the police." The voice outside chuckled, soft and friendly, like two men sharing a joke. "No need for that. It'll just scare her more. I'll take her home, she'll calm down, and we'll be out of your hair in 5 minutes." The owner's eyes slid, not to the man's face, but to his hands. Maya knew why. She'd watched those hands before, how they could look empty until they weren't. The owner said, "You can wait outside while I check." "You can just open the door," the man replied. The owner didn't move. The man outside let the friendliness fade by a fraction. "Sir, don't make this difficult. I'm trying to do the right thing." Maya's throat tightened. That was the turn. The moment the mask shifted. Behind her, from somewhere outside the laundromat, another engine revved, louder, closer, then settled into an idle that vibrated through the walls. Not one car, at least two, maybe more. The owner seemed to register it too. His jaw clenched. He glanced toward the side windows, where shadows moved behind the frosted glass. Someone circling the building. Maya couldn't stop shaking. Her knees hurt from the tile. Her wet hair clung to her face. She wiped it back with a trembling hand and felt the object in her pocket again. The owner's voice stayed steady. "I'm not opening the door." Outside, the man's tone stayed soft, but the softness sharpened. "You don't understand what you're getting between." The owner leaned closer to the glass, speaking with the same measured calm. "I understand you're not leaving." A beat of silence. Then the man outside said, almost kindly, "Maya, tell him to open the door." Maya's body reacted before her brain did, a flinch so violent it sent a small spray of water onto the floor. The owner turned his head slightly, listening, and for the first time his eyes narrowed at Maya, not accusing, but assessing the scale of the danger. He spoke without looking at her. "How does he know your name?" Maya could barely breathe. Because he, her voice cracked, because he already had it. The owner's gaze hardened. He reached under the counter again, and this time he pulled out something heavier, wrapped in a cloth. He didn't unwrap it, but the way he held it changed the air. Outside, the handle stopped moving. Maya held her breath, waiting for the crash, the kick, the shattering glass. Instead, she heard a new sound. A low, rising chorus of engines, multiple, approaching fast, then slowing as they turned onto the street. Headlights swept across the laundromat windows in wide arcs, brighter than before, filling the room with moving white glare. The owner's face tightened. Maya's stomach dropped through the floor, because the engines didn't sound like someone giving up. They sounded like someone arriving. And in the same instant, the front door handle turned slowly, smoothly, like a key had just slipped into the lock from the outside, and whoever held it was taking their time. The lock clicked with the slow confidence of someone who didn't need to force anything. Maya's eyes fixed on the door like it was a mouth about to open and swallow her. Her legs wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run to, only machines, tile, and the chained back exit that might as well have been a wall. Behind the counter, the owner didn't move for a full second. He just listened. The handle turned another fraction. He lifted one finger toward Maya without looking at her. Stay. Then, with controlled speed, he stepped away from the door and flipped a second latch she hadn't even noticed, a thick metal bar that slid into brackets across the frame, the kind of add-on you install after someone tries to break in once, or after something worse. The handle reached the end of its turn. The door shifted, but only an inch. The bar held. Outside, the man's voice floated through the narrow gap, still smooth, still patient. Oh, you've got an extra lock. Smart. Maya tasted bile. The owner leaned toward the gap but didn't put his face close to it. How did you get a key? A soft chuckle. It's a laundromat. People copy keys. Owners lend them out. Things happen. The owner's eyes cut toward the camera in the corner again, like he was calculating what was being captured. Then his gaze slid to the side window. Headlights flared across it and died, replaced by shadow moving right up against the frosted glass. Someone was standing there. Maya pressed back into the hallway darkness, her shoulder against the cold metal of a dryer. She tried to make herself invisible, but the wet on her clothes felt like it glowed. Outside, the voice lowered, losing a little warmth. Sir, I don't want to damage your property. Just remove the bar and let me in. The owner didn't answer. He spoke over his shoulder, barely audible. What did you take from him? Maya blinked. The question was so direct it didn't make sense at first. What did you take? He repeated, sharper. Because he's not here for an apology. Maya's fingers closed around the object in her pocket. For a second, she considered lying, saying nothing, protecting it by keeping it secret. Then she remembered his voice saying her name like he owned it. She remembered the way he'd smiled in the car while locking the doors. He dropped his phone, she whispered. In the car. I grabbed it when I ran. The owner's jaw tightened. His phone. It wasn't just a phone, Maya said fast, words tumbling. I saw messages, pictures, a list. I didn't mean to, he left it open and I saw my name in a thread, and a thud hit the side of the building, not the front door, the wall, like someone testing how solid it was. Maya flinched so hard her knees slid on the tile. The owner kept his voice low. How old are you? 17. You have family. Maya's throat tightened. Not safe family. He held her gaze for a beat like he was trying to decide whether she was telling the truth, based on how her pupils shook. Outside, the man's voice came again, still calm, but now edged with impatience. Maya, stop this. You're making it worse. Maya squeezed her eyes shut. The sound of her name made her feel like a leash tightened around her neck. The owner spoke toward the door. She's not here. Silence. Then the man outside said, almost gently, if she's not there, open the door and prove it. The owner's mouth twitched like he almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. No. A pause. Then, from the side window, a knuckle tapped the glass. 3 soft taps. A different rhythm. A different person. Maya turned her head. She could see only a shadow through the frosted pane, tall and motionless. The tapping came again, slow, like a reminder. The owner's eyes narrowed. He reached under the counter and this time he pulled out a small device, thumb flicking something on. Maya realized it wasn't wrapped in cloth. He just had it half covered to keep it out of sight. A stun gun? A flashlight? She couldn't tell. He stepped away from the door, moving sideways so he could watch both the front and the side window. Listen, he murmured to Maya without looking at her. If you have his phone, he's not here to negotiate. I know, Maya whispered. He said he'd bring me back. Back to where? Maya's voice broke. To the place he keeps girls. For the first time, the owner's calm cracked, just a flash of something hot behind his eyes, anger or disgust or both. Then it was gone, sealed under control. Outside, a new sound slid into the rain, another car door closing, then another, heavy, confident, engines idled, multiple. Maya's stomach twisted. They're everywhere. The owner's gaze flicked to the ceiling camera again. Good. The word hit Maya wrong. Good? Before she could ask, the man outside spoke again, but now his politeness had thinned to a wire. Sir, Last chance. The owner inhaled slowly, then lifted his voice steady and flat. Leave. The reply came softer, and that softness was worse than shouting. Okay. The calmness in that single word made Maya's skin prickle. She'd heard it before. Okay, the way you say it when you've decided you're going to do whatever you want anyway. The owner moved fast. He crossed the laundromat in 3 long strides and killed the last working ceiling strip, plunging the room back into dim green and vending machine glow. Then he reached to the wall near the door and flicked another switch. The open sign in the window died. In the sudden darker silence, Maya could hear everything: rain on glass, engines outside, the faint electrical hum of machines waiting. She could even hear the owner's breathing, slow, controlled, like he was keeping his heart from betraying him. He returned to the hallway and crouched beside Maya, lowering himself to her level. Up close, she saw the dried stain on his knuckles like he'd been in a fight earlier in the day, or 100 fights in his life. "What's your name?" he asked again. She hesitated. "Maya." His eyes didn't soften. Real. Her throat tightened. She swallowed. "Marin." He nodded once like he filed it away. "Marin, I'm Gabe." "Gabe," she repeated, because saying it made him more human, less like a shadow that could turn on her. Gabe glanced down at her pocket. "Give me the phone." Maya's hand instinctively pressed harder against it. "No." His gaze snapped up, hard. "If you keep it, you die with it." Maya's breath stuttered. "It's the only thing. It's the reason they're here." Gabe leaned closer, voice a knife. "If you want to live, you give me the reason, and you do what I tell you." Marin's eyes burned. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run straight through the glass and let the world see her, let anyone help. But she could already feel those hands on her again. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the phone out. It was slick with rain and sweat. The screen was cracked at the corner. She held it out like it might bite. Gabe took it and didn't look at the screen yet. He slid it into his own jacket pocket like he was hiding a blade. "Good," he said, and it wasn't praise. It was procedure. From the front door, there was a new sound, metal scraping softly along the frame. Not the handle, something else. Marin's stomach dropped. "What's that?" Gabe's face went still. "A pry bar." The scraping stopped. A beat. Then the front glass shuddered with a dull impact. Not enough to break it. A test strike. Marin's whole body jolted. Gabe's voice stayed low. "Don't scream." Another impact, harder. The door rattled in its frame, the metal bar across it groaning. Marin clamped her hands over her mouth. Tears rolled down and mixed with rain on her cheeks. Gabe reached behind the detergent stack and pulled out a roll of thick zip ties. He shoved them into his pocket, then grabbed a small can from a shelf. Pepper spray. He checked it with a thumb. The movements were practiced. "You planned for this," Marin whispered, disbelief cracking through her fear. Gabe didn't answer. Another strike hit the glass. A spiderweb of cracks bloomed outward, catching the green exit glow like shattered ice. Marin moaned behind her hands. Gabe's eyes flicked once to the floor hatch under the mop bucket. "When I say go, you go down." "Where does it—" "Doesn't matter," he cut in. "It's not up here." The glass took another hit. The web of cracks widened. Outside, the pursuer's voice rose slightly, not shouting, just carrying. "Marin, I'm going to come in now. If you make me do this the hard way, you'll regret it." Hearing her real name out loud made her stomach twist. Gabe's head turned sharply toward the door. "How does he know that?" Gabe murmured. Marin's voice was a tremble. "Because he has files on all of us." The glass shuddered again, and this time a piece fell inward with a tinkling crash, scattering like ice onto the tile. Air rushed in, cold and wet. Marin's body tried to bolt, but Gabe's hand shot out and clamped gently but firmly around her wrist. Not painful. Anchoring. "Eyes on me," Gabe whispered. "Breathe." Another piece of glass dropped. Then a hand appeared through the broken hole, gloved, steady, reaching for the inner latch. Gabe moved like a switch flipped. He lunged forward, grabbed the wrist through the broken glass, and yanked hard. The hand jerked, and whoever was attached to it stumbled forward with a grunt. Gabe slammed the pepper spray into the opening and fired. A wet, choking sound came from outside. A man cursed, gagging. His hand flailed, knocked against the broken glass, and withdrew. Gabe didn't waste the moment. He kicked the door from the inside, hard, using the metal bar as leverage. The impact slammed the door against whoever was there, and a body thudded back. Marin stared, shocked. Gabe wasn't just defending, he was countering. Outside, the pursuer's voice changed. The politeness vanished. "Gabe," he said, and hearing Gabe's name spoken like that made Marin's blood run cold. "I don't want this to get ugly." Gabe froze for a fraction, his eyes narrowed. "You know me." A pause, then the pursuer answered, almost amused. "I know your type." Marin's breath caught. Gabe's jaw tightened so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. The engines outside grew louder as someone tapped the gas, a show of power. Headlights swept the front again, and Marin saw silhouettes through the cracked glass, 2, 3, maybe more, moving into positions like they'd done this before, like they were setting a perimeter. The pursuer's voice lowered, intimate, meant to slip under Gabe's skin. "You run a little charity here, Gabe? A little hiding place? That's cute." Gabe didn't reply. He backed away from the broken door and returned to Marin. He crouched again, lowering his voice to a whisper. "They're not random," he said. "They came prepared." Marin nodded, shaking. Gabe reached into his pocket and pulled out the phone she'd given him. He glanced at the screen now, quick. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, like he recognized what he was seeing, like it confirmed a suspicion he'd been holding for years. He locked the screen again and stuffed it back in his jacket. "Okay," he murmured, almost to himself. Marin's voice cracked. "What's on it?" Gabe looked at her. Enough. The word landed heavy. Enough for what? Enough to save her? Enough to kill her? Before she could ask, a new sound cut through the rain. Boots on tile, not inside, not yet, but right outside the broken door, stepping closer, slow and deliberate, as if someone was walking into their living room. Gabe lifted a hand, signaling Marin to stay low. Marin's whole body shook. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip. Then the pursuer spoke again, close now, right on the other side of the shattered glass. "Marin," he said softly, and his voice was smiling. "You gave it to him, didn't you?" Marin's throat closed. Gabe's eyes stayed on the door. His posture went still, coiled. The pursuer continued, voice gentle, almost affectionate. "That's okay. He'll give it back. He'll give you back. He's going to do the smart thing," Gabe whispered without turning his head. "When I say drop, you drop through the hatch. You do not hesitate." Marin's eyes flicked to the mop bucket hiding the floor hatch. Outside, the pursuer's hand slid into view through the broken glass again, but this time it wasn't reaching for the latch. It was holding something small and dark, pinched between fingers. A key. He dangled it where Gabe could see, like a joke. Then he let it fall. It hit the tile with a tiny metallic ping and skittered to a stop right in the middle of the laundromat floor, under the dim green exit glow. Marin stared at it, confused for half a second, until she saw the second key behind it, and the third. A handful of keys clattered onto the tile one after another, each ping a quiet promise. "We can open whatever you lock." Gabe didn't move. His eyes stayed on the keys like they were teeth. The pursuer's voice softened even more, velvet over a blade. "I have your doors, Gabe. I have your cameras. I have your schedule. And I have her." Marin's vision tunneled. Gabe's hand tightened on the pepper spray. Then, from somewhere outside, farther back in the street, another sound rose above the rain and engines. A different kind of engine, more of them, not just circling, approaching in a line, fast, synchronized, like something had just been triggered. And Gabe's mouth moved, barely audible, as if he was answering a message only he could hear. Finally. The keys lay on the tile like a dare. Marin couldn't stop staring at them. Ordinary keys, cheap metal, the kind that should have meant nothing. But in the dim green glow, they looked like teeth, scattered by someone who enjoyed the sound of them hitting the floor. Gabe didn't go for them. He didn't even blink. He kept his body angled between Marin and the broken door, shoulders loose, knees soft, like a man standing in a ring waiting for the bell. Outside, the pursuer's silhouette shifted closer to the gap. Rainwater streamed down the glass and bled into the fractures like veins. His voice stayed low, intimate, as if this was a private conversation, and the night was the wall that kept it in. "You're thinking," he said. "That's good. Smart men think." Gabe's mouth didn't move, but his eyes flicked once to the ceiling camera. Marin followed the glance again. She could see the little red dot now, faint but present. Recording. The pursuer must have known too, because he added, almost playfully, "Go ahead, keep filming. I love receipts." Marin's stomach twisted. He said it like he couldn't be touched by evidence. Gabe spoke at last, voice flat, controlled. "Back up from the door." A soft laugh. "Why?" "Because I'm telling you." "Ah." The pursuer's tone warmed. "Authority. Cute." The rain outside thickened for a moment, drumming on the overhang. Somewhere down the street, those new engines, a different set, grew louder, then faded slightly as if they'd slowed and turned. Marin couldn't tell if that was good or worse. Gabe's head turned a fraction toward the sound. His jaw tightened again, but his eyes stayed on the broken opening. He whispered without looking back, "When I say go, you go." Marin nodded, though she didn't trust her legs to work. The pursuer shifted. A hand appeared at the broken edge of the door, fingers resting lightly on the jagged glass as if he didn't care if it cut him. Then the hand slid away, and the man's face leaned into view, close enough that Marin saw him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she expected, early 30s, hair slicked back, rain beating on his skin like he'd just stepped out of something expensive. His eyes were the worst part, not wild, not angry, patient, curious. Like he was studying an insect pinned under glass. He smiled when he saw Gabe, not a grin, a controlled lift at one corner. "Gabe," he said again, tasting the name. "It's been a minute." Gabe didn't answer. The pursuer's gaze drifted past Gabe, scanning the shadows between machines, the hallway mouth where Marin was crouched. He wasn't looking for movement. He was looking for the absence of it, the places someone could hide and the places they couldn't. His eyes paused on the mop bucket. Marin's throat closed. Gabe saw it. He stepped 1 inch to the side, blocking the line of sight to the bucket without making it obvious. His body was a door. The pursuer's smile deepened like he appreciated the move. "You're still doing this," he murmured, "still playing guard dog." Gabe's voice remained even. "Who are you?" Marin almost gasped. "Who are you?" As if Gabe didn't know, as if the name didn't matter. The pursuer's brows lifted. "Really? You're going to pretend?" Gabe said nothing. The pursuer sighed dramatically, then glanced at the ceiling camera again. "Fine. Let's make it simple." He took a half step back from the door and raised his voice slightly, just enough to reach the shadows. "Marin, you can come out now. You did your little run. You got your little thrill. And now you're cold and scared, and you're not going to sleep for a week unless you stop doing this." Marin pressed both hands to her mouth again. Her whole body wanted to fold in on itself. He continued, soft as honey. "I'm not angry at you. I'm disappointed. I offered you safety, a job, food, a place, and you chose drama." Gabe's eyes went razor sharp. Marin saw him calculating every word, every angle, every second. The pursuer tilted his head. "Or, maybe you think you're a hero now. Maybe you think you can save the other girls by grabbing a phone and running into the rain." Marin's hand clenched around nothing. She could feel the phone still, even though it wasn't in her pocket anymore. Phantom weight. Gabe's voice cut in, low but clear. "Stop talking to her." The pursuer's smile didn't move. "No." That single syllable was the first true threat. A shadow moved at the side window, someone circling closer. Marin heard the faint squeak of wet rubber on tile outside, then a soft scrape along the wall like a hand brushing brick. They were closing in. The pursuer's eyes stayed on Gabe. "Let me in," he said. "We don't need to break anything else. You and I both know how this goes when people get stubborn." Gabe's fingers tightened around the pepper spray. "You already broke my door." "I can pay," the pursuer replied lightly. "I can buy you a new building. Don't act like you care about glass." Gabe stared at him. The pursuer leaned in again, closer, voice dropping. "I know what you are, Gabe." Gabe's expression didn't change. "And what's that?" "A man who makes himself feel clean," the pursuer said softly, "by wiping up other people's messes." Marin's stomach churned. The way he spoke, like he knew Gabe's nerves. Gabe didn't bite. He said, "You're not taking her." The pursuer's smile finally slipped. Not much, just enough to show what was underneath. He exhaled through his nose like he'd lost patience with a child. "Okay," the word again. That calm, lethal, "okay." He straightened and looked past the broken door toward the street, as if listening for something. Then he turned slightly and spoke to someone out of frame. "Check the side." A voice answered, male, close. "Already on it." The shadow at the frosted window moved again, closer. Then a shape pressed against the glass, the blurred outline of a head, shoulder, arm. Marin's heartbeat went insane. Gabe whispered, "If they get inside from the side, you go down. No waiting for me." Marin's eyes widened. "What about you?" Gabe didn't look at her. "Go." The pursuer's gaze snapped back into the laundromat. He had heard that? No, he couldn't. But he read something in Gabe's posture. The man was too observant. He smiled again, and this time it was almost affectionate. "You care," he said. "That's your weakness." Gabe's voice went colder. "You should leave." The pursuer's eyes flicked to the keys on the floor. "You should pick those up," he said. "Some of them open more than doors." Marin felt her skin crawl. Then he reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberate, making sure Gabe and the camera saw the motion. Marin's muscles locked, waiting for the flash of a weapon. But what he pulled out wasn't a gun. It was a laminated card held between two fingers. He lifted it toward the broken glass so the camera could catch it. Marin squinted, trying to read it through the distance and dim light. It looked official. A badge. Some kind of ID. The pursuer spoke, voice smooth. "This is the part where you realize you're in the wrong." Gabe's eyes narrowed. He didn't step closer. He didn't give the man the satisfaction. The pursuer's smile widened. "I'm going to say this once, Gabe. Open up. I retrieve my property. You stay alive. Everyone goes home." Marin's throat tightened at property. She felt herself start to shake harder. Gabe's voice came out like stone. "She's not your property." The pursuer's eyes didn't blink. "Everything is somebody's property, if you know the right paperwork." He lowered the badge and tucked it back in his jacket like it was nothing. Then he did something Marin didn't expect. He stepped away from the door completely, backing up 2 full paces, hands open. For a second, she thought he was retreating. Then she heard it. A thin, high electronic chirp, barely audible, coming from somewhere near the doorframe. Gabe's head snapped toward the sound. Marin's blood went cold. "What is that?" Gabe's voice sharpened. "Get down!" Marin threw herself to the floor. A sharp pop sounded, small but violent. The metal bar across the door jolted. Another pop. The frame shuddered. Not a battering ram, a tool. A lock spreader or hydraulic jack, forcing the door inward, millimeter by millimeter. The door groaned, the hinges screaming under pressure. Gabe moved fast, grabbing the edge of a folding table and slamming it sideways toward the door as a brace, wedging it at an angle. The table legs skidded across tile, scraping loud in the otherwise dim room. The pursuer's voice floated from outside, calm as ever. "You're making it expensive." The doorframe cracked with another sharp sound, like bone. Marin crawled backward, away from the front toward the hallway and the mop bucket. Her fingers slipped on the tile. She could feel the cold through her jeans. Gabe shouted, "Marin, now!" She reached the mop bucket, yanked it aside, and found the hatch. Her hands fumbled. There was a small recessed ring. She hooked her fingers into it and pulled. The hatch didn't move. Panic surged. She yanked again, nails bending. Nothing. "It's stuck," she whispered, voice breaking. Gabe's head snapped toward her, eyes furious, not at her, at the situation. "Pull harder." Marin grabbed the ring with both hands and leaned back with everything she had. Pain shot up her arms. The hatch shifted an inch, just enough to let a breath of stale, cold air roll out like a sigh from underground. Marin's whole body trembled. She widened it, inch by inch. Behind her, the front door frame gave with a loud crack. The metal bar bowed. The folding table shoved back, legs skittering. Gabe lunged, bracing his shoulder against it, holding the line with his body. Marin looked back and saw him there, one man against a door being forced by a machine. The pursuer's silhouette appeared in the gap as the door opened wider, rain blowing in like smoke. The pursuer's voice was almost gentle. "There you are." Marin's hands shook as she opened the hatch fully. A dark hole yawned beneath her, smelling of dust and old concrete. Gabe's voice was a roar now, pure command. "Go!" Marin slid her legs into the hole, lowering herself fast, scraping her shins. Darkness swallowed her up to the waist. Above her, Gabe's shoulder slipped as the folding table snapped, one leg folding under pressure. The door swung wider. A boot stepped onto the tile. Marin looked up from the hatch and saw the pursuer's face through the gap, calm, pleased, like he was watching a performance. He glanced down and saw the open hatch. For the first time, his smile changed, not wider, sharper. And outside, over the rain and the groaning door, the chorus of approaching engines rose again, closer now, more of them, enough to make the windows vibrate as Marin dropped into the dark and the hatch began to swing shut above her. Marin fell into the dark like the floor had betrayed her. The drop was only a few feet, but in her head it was endless, hands grabbing at her ankles, her skull cracking on concrete, the hatch slamming shut and sealing her in a tomb. She hit hard on her knees, pain shooting up her legs, and a sharp gasp tore out of her before she could stop it. Above, the hatch swung. A sliver of green exit light cut across the dust-filled air, then narrowed as the opening shifted. Marin scrambled backward on hands and knees, away from the hole, away from the possibility of a boot stamping down. The hatch didn't close all the way. It hovered half shut, held by something. Gabe's hand, maybe, or the hinge catching. And through that slit, she heard everything. The door groaned. The rain hissed against tile. A wet footstep entered the laundromat with the weight of certainty. Then the pursuer spoke, closer, inside now. "Gabe," he said mildly, like they were in a bar. "You didn't have to do this." Gabe's voice came strained but steady, as if he was still bracing the broken folding table with his body. "Get out of my building." A soft laugh. "Your building? That's cute. You still think in terms of ownership. I thought you were above that." Metal scraped. The table shifted again. Marin pictured Gabe's shoulder giving, his knees sliding, the door opening wider. Her fingers clawed at the gritty concrete. She moved deeper into the crawl space, following the direction her instincts chose, away from voices, away from light, toward the unknown. The passage was low and narrow, unfinished concrete walls close enough to scrape her elbows. Pipes ran overhead, sweating with condensation. Somewhere, a slow drip fell in a steady rhythm, like a clock counting down. Marin shoved her way forward, breath loud in her ears, trying to keep it quiet, but failing. Her jeans soaked up grime. Dust coated her tongue. Above her, Gabe's voice shifted, less strained now, more deliberate. "You're not leaving with her." The pursuer sighed. "I'm leaving with what's mine. Whether she walks or I carry her is entirely up to you." A pause. Then Gabe asked something that made Marin freeze mid-crawl. "What's your badge say tonight?" Silence. Not from the pursuer. Silence like the room itself held its breath. Then the pursuer answered, amused. "Still recording? Still thinking you'll put together some little case file and save the world?" Gabe didn't rise to it. He just repeated, calmer. "What's your badge say?" The pursuer chuckled. "It says whatever I need it to say." Marin's heart hammered so hard, it shook her. She crawled faster. The passage dipped slightly, then leveled, then opened into a wider section where the ceiling rose high enough that she could crouch rather than crawl. Her shoulders sagged with a fraction of relief until she saw the wall ahead. A steel door. Not a normal basement door. Thicker, reinforced, with a keypad mounted beside it. A faint red light glowed on the pad like an unblinking eye. Marin stared, stunned. A keypad. In a laundromat basement. Her hands shook as she reached for the handle. Locked. She tried again, harder. Locked. Behind her, above, a sound punched through the air. Something heavy hitting something heavier. A body, maybe. A grunt. Then Gabe's voice, low and sharp, as if he'd been hit and refused to show it. "You know what's funny?" the pursuer said, tone conversational. "You think you're protecting her, but you're just choosing which cage she ends up in." Marin's stomach turned. She slapped her palm against the steel door, then realized immediately it was stupid. Noise traveled down here. She forced her hands away, pressing her forehead to the cold metal, trying to think. Keypad. Code. She didn't have it. Her gaze dropped to the floor and caught on something that made her breath stop. A strip of blue painter's tape stuck near the base of the keypad, with 4 numbers written in black marker. Marin blinked, sure she was hallucinating. The numbers were smudged, half-peeled. Someone had left the code in plain sight. Her fingers trembled as she typed it in, one digit at a time. The pad beeped softly. A green light flashed. The lock clicked. Marin yanked the door open and stumbled through. The space beyond wasn't a basement. It was a room. Concrete walls, but clean. Shelves, stacks of folded blankets, bottled water, a first aid kit, a duffel bag half open with flashlights and spare batteries, a small table with a radio set, its display lit. And on the far wall, maps, actual maps, street grids with routes marked, photos pinned with names written underneath in sharp handwriting. Marin's skin prickled. This wasn't a hiding hole for one scared girl. It was a system. She stepped in, slowly, like she was walking into someone else's life. The door swung shut behind her with a heavy sealed thud that made her jump. For a second, the world above felt far away. Then the radio on the table crackled. A voice, female, low and clipped, cut through static. "Gabe, respond." Marin froze. The radio crackled again. "Gabe, I've got 4 units turning onto Larkin. Confirm you triggered the call." Marin's mouth went dry. Units, call, 4 units, the engines. She stared at the radio as if it might bite her. Her instincts screamed not to touch it, but above, the noises had changed. There was movement, fast and deliberate, more than 2 men now. A shout cut off abruptly, the sound of something glassy crunching underfoot. Then, the pursuer's voice, closer to shouting for the first time. "Find her!" Marin's blood turned to ice. He had people inside. He'd gotten through completely. The radio hissed again. "Gabe, answer or I'm coming in blind." Marin's lungs locked. Coming in, blind. Whatever was happening, it was moving whether she wanted it or not. She took 1 step toward the table, then stopped. Her eyes snagged on something else. A small camera on a tripod, aimed at the steel door she'd just entered through. A red recording light on. Gabe had eyes down here too. Marin's mind tried to make sense of it and failed. If Gabe was prepared, why hadn't he just called the cops? Why was there a network? Who were these units? The radio crackled, sharper. "Gabe, say something." Marin reached out, fingers hovering over the transmit button like it was a live wire. Above, the floor vibrated, footsteps directly overhead, quick, searching. A man's voice barked, muffled by concrete. "Basement! Check the basement!" Marin's stomach dropped. They knew. She pressed the radio button without thinking. Her voice came out thin, raw. He's inside. He's looking for me." Static. A pause. Then the female voice returned, immediate, focused. "Who is this?" Marin swallowed. "Marin." Another pause, shorter. "Marin who?" I don't know what you need. Please, he's going to..." Her voice cracked. "He's going to take me." The radio hissed as someone breathed on the other end. Then the voice said, cold and steady, "Marin, listen carefully. Stay in that room. Do not open the steel door for anyone. Do you understand?" Marin's eyes stung. "Yes." The voice continued, more clipped now, like issuing orders. "Lock it. Barricade if you can. Gabe will keep them busy." Marin's chest tightened. "Gabe, he's..." A new voice cut in over the radio, male, deeper. "Confirm hostiles. Confirm count." The female voice snapped back, "At least 3, possibly more. They breached." Marin's skin went cold. "At least 3, possibly more." The pursuer hadn't come with just one partner. He'd come with a team. The radio crackled again. "Marin, where is Gabe?" Marin looked around the room, desperate for answers she didn't have. "Upstairs, at the front." "Okay," the voice said, the same lethal calm Marine had heard from the pursuer, but coming from the other side. "We're 2 minutes out." 2 minutes. Marin's breath hitched. 2 minutes was a lifetime. Above, a heavy thud shook dust from the ceiling. Someone slammed something. Maybe the hatch, maybe a door, maybe a body, then a sharp crack, like a gunshot. Marin flinched so hard she nearly dropped the radio. Silence followed, then a sound like someone choking for air. Then Gabe's voice, faint through concrete, strained but alive, saying something Marin couldn't make out. And over it, the pursuer's voice, lower now, controlled again, as if he'd regained the script. "You have 2 minutes," he said to Gabe, almost gently. "Then I start breaking fingers until someone tells me where she went." Marin's vision tunneled. She pressed both hands to her mouth to keep herself from making a sound. Footsteps pounded overhead, crossing back and forth. Then a new sound. Closer, directly above the room, metal scraping against metal. Not the front door, not glass, a tool on a steel hatch. They were trying to get into the basement from another access point. Marin spun, scanning the room for anything. Anything to lock the steel door more, anything to fight with. Her eyes landed on a heavy shelf unit bolted to the wall, too heavy to move. A table, a chair, a duffel bag with tools. She grabbed the table first, shoving it toward the steel door she'd entered, wedging it under the handle as best she could. The legs scraped loudly, and she winced, but it was too late to be quiet now. She grabbed the chair, jammed it sideways, creating a crude brace. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip. The radio crackled, the female voice again. Marin. Status. Marin pressed the button, voice trembling. They're above me. They're trying another way in. Copy, the voice said. Stay put. Do not open. Marin let go of the button. Her body shook uncontrollably. Above, the metal scraping grew more aggressive. Then came a low, vibrating whine, like a drill starting. Marin's eyes widened in horror. They weren't going to search politely. They were going to cut their way down. She backed away from the door and looked around, frantic. The room had only one other exit, a narrow corridor at the far end, half hidden behind a hanging tarp. She hadn't noticed it at first. She ran to it, yanked the tarp aside. A short hallway led to another door, this one plain, with no keypad. It had a simple lock and a sign taped to it, storage. Marin tried the handle. Locked, of course. Her mind screamed. She spun back toward the main room, hearing the drill above intensify, dust starting to fall in fine streams from the ceiling seams. The radio hissed again. A different voice now, male, urgent. Gabe, we've got eyes on the block. Multiple vehicles, no plates. This is organized. Gabe's voice finally cut through, weak but present, breathy. They're in the building. Don't come through the front. The female voice snapped back. We're already committed. Where's Marin? Gabe's reply was strained, like each word cost him. Basement safe. Steel room. Copy, the female voice said instantly. Hold. We're 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Marin pressed her palm against her mouth, trying not to cry. Above, the drill sound stopped. For one terrifying beat, there was silence. Then a heavy ringing impact, metal on metal, like something being struck to dislodge it. A shower of dust fell from the ceiling, sparkling in the faint light. Marin looked up, eyes wide, heart punching her ribs. Another impact, then the sound of metal tearing, a sharp shriek. The ceiling panel above the room, one section, shifted slightly, separating from whatever held it. Marin's breath stopped. A shadow passed over the gap. Then a face appeared at the opening above, upside down, peering in, eyes narrowed, scanning, hunting. Not the pursuer. One of his men. He spotted Marin instantly, his mouth open to shout. And at that exact moment, outside the building, engines roared again, much closer now, so loud the walls vibrated and the lights in the safe room flickered. The man's head jerked at the noise. Marin's stomach dropped because she recognized the sound, not as one car, but as a coordinated arrival, multiple engines braking, doors opening in sequence. The radio exploded with voices. Units on site. Rear access secured. Front contact. Visual on hostiles. Marin couldn't breathe. The man above swore and started to force the ceiling panel wider. And upstairs, through concrete and chaos, the pursuer's voice rose, sharp, angry. The calm finally shattered. Move! Move! They're here! The safe room light flickered again. The ceiling panel tore open another inch, and Marin realized with cold clarity that whatever was roaring outside, it wasn't guaranteed to be rescue. The ceiling panel above the safe room peeled back another inch with a sound like bone snapping. Marin stumbled backward until her shoulder hit the concrete wall. Dust drifted down into her hair, into her eyelashes, into her mouth. She tasted grit and panic. The man above gripped the torn edge with both hands, muscles in his forearms flexing as he worked it wider. His eyes found her again immediately, cold, focused, no surprise left. He wasn't hunting a girl anymore. He was retrieving an item. His mouth opened and Marin knew what was coming, an alert, a shout, a signal to the others upstairs. Before he could make a sound, the safe room radio burst with overlapping voices, rapid and coordinated. Rear access confirmed. 2 hostiles on the alley side. Front contact, visual, 1 male in a black jacket, medium build, Possible leader. Hold perimeter. Do not enter alone. The man above flinched at the sudden noise. His head tilted, listening. Then he hissed something under his breath and started forcing himself down through the opening. Marin's knees went weak. The space was too tight for him to drop cleanly, so he came in like a wedge, one shoulder first, then an elbow, then his head. Metal scraped. Concrete dust fell in a thick spill. He grunted, cursed, and kicked his boots against the ceiling to gain leverage. Marin's hands searched the air behind her for anything, found only cold wall. The female voice on the radio snapped, sharper now. "Marin, eyes on you. Confirm your room is compromised." "Eyes on you." Marin's breath caught. She looked around wildly for a camera and found it, the tripod in the corner, aimed at the steel door, the red light still blinking. If they had a feed, they could see her in the ceiling breach, or maybe they only had audio. Either way, they were listening. She slammed the transmit button with trembling fingers. He's coming in, through the ceiling." "Copy," the voice said instantly. "Stay low. Move to the east wall, under the shelving." Under the shelving, Marin's gaze darted to the biggest shelf unit, stacked with blankets and water, low clearance beneath it, a shadow pocket. She dropped to her knees and crawled fast, pain flaring where she'd landed earlier. Her palms slid over dust and tiny metal shavings. She shoved herself under the shelf, just as the man above tore free and dropped into the room. He hit the floor hard, knees bending to absorb it, then straightened with a quickness that made him look larger. He wore dark tactical pants and a rain-soaked hoodie, but his movements were too disciplined for some random thug. His face was sharp-featured, jaw clenched, eyes already scanning. He spotted the barricaded steel door first, then the tarp-covered corridor, then the locked storage door. He processed the space like a map, then his eyes dropped to the floor near the shelf. To Marin. Her breath stopped. She pressed her cheek to the concrete, willing herself to become part of the dust. The man's mouth pulled into a thin smile, not pleased, relieved, like finding a lost tool. "Hey," he said softly. Marin didn't move. He took one step toward her, slow and careful, as if he didn't want to startle her into doing something stupid. "It's okay. It's okay. You're coming with me." The radio hissed. Marin heard the faintest whisper in her ear, static in the female voice, quieter now, like she was talking directly into Marin's head. "Marin, do not engage. Stay still." The man's eyes flicked to the radio on the table. His smile twitched. He stepped over to it and pressed the transmit button. "Stop talking," he said into it calmly, as if correcting an annoying coworker. He released the button and looked back at Marin. "So, this is the cute part, right? You hide, we find you. Everyone wastes time." Marin's whole body shook under the shelf. He crouched, lowering his head to see her better. His voice stayed soft, almost kind. "Where's the phone?" Marin's throat tightened. He leaned closer. "Don't make me guess." Marin didn't answer. Her eyes burned, her jaw locked. The man sighed like a parent dealing with a stubborn kid. "Okay." That word again. It came from them like a switch. He reached under the shelf fast and grabbed her ankle. Marin screamed. She couldn't stop it, the sound ripping out of her, then clamped her hands over her mouth too late. He yanked once, hard. Marin's body slid on dust. Her head bumped the shelf leg. Pain exploded behind her eyes. She kicked, wild heel catching his wrist. He grunted but didn't let go. He yanked again, dragging her out far enough that her hips cleared the shelf. Cold air hit her like she'd been exposed. Marin clawed at the floor, nails scraping. The man pulled again. Marin's shoulders slid out, and suddenly she was on her back in the open, staring up at his face. He didn't look angry. He looked efficient. "See?" he murmured. "This is easier." He shifted his grip from her ankle to her wrist, pinning it. His other hand reached toward her jacket pocket, searching for the weight he expected. Marin's mind screamed, "The phone isn't there! The phone isn't there!" His fingers patted the pocket and found nothing. His expression changed for the first time, annoyance, sharp and quick. He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "You gave it to him." Marin's lips trembled. She forced out a whisper. "I don't have it." The man's mouth tightened. "Where is Gabe?" Marin stared at him. Her fear was a flood, but somewhere underneath it was a spark of anger. "Upstairs," she whispered. He didn't ask again. He shifted his knee onto her forearm, pressing just enough to hurt, not enough to break. A demonstration, a promise. "Then you're coming," he said. "We'll trade." Marin's vision swam. The radio on the table crackled, sudden, loud, urgent. Hostile inside the safe room. Confirm. Confirm. The man looked toward the radio with irritation. So loud, he muttered, then reached to smash it, and the steel door behind him shook violently. The barricaded door, Marin's entry door, trembled under a heavy impact from the other side. Not the ceiling, not the hatch. Someone was at that door. The man froze for a fraction, head snapping toward it. Another impact hit, louder, more deliberate, like someone testing the braces. Then a voice came through the steel, muffled but clear enough to cut through the room. "Step away from the girl." Not the female voice, a new one, male, older, calm in a way that felt heavier than calm, like command without needing to prove it. The man on top of Marin smiled, slow. "Yeah?" he called back. "Or what?" The steel door vibrated again, and this time Marin heard the scrape of metal on metal, the sound of a tool biting into the lock. The man's head tilted, listening, calculating. Then he looked back down at Maureen, eyes sharp. "Who's down there with you?" he asked. Moran's throat worked. She didn't answer. He grabbed her by the collar and hauled her up to her feet in one rough motion. Moran staggered, dizziness washing over her. He kept his grip tight like a leash. He pulled a zip tie from his pocket. In one quick, practiced movement, he looped it around Maureen's wrists before she could react. Tightened. The plastic bit into her skin. Her hands went numb immediately. Marin gasped. "Please!" He didn't even look at her. "Shut up." The steel door lock clicked, once, then again, like someone bypassing it. The man's eyes widened a fraction. He hadn't expected them to get through fast. He dragged Marin toward the tarp corridor, away from the steel door. Marin's feet slid, her shoes squeaking on dust. She tried to pull back, but the zip tie and his grip made her feel weightless. The steel door bucked outward, a final metallic groan. Then it swung inward. Light spilled into the safe room, bright, white, harsh, cutting through the dust like a blade. A figure filled the doorway, silhouette framed by that light, tall, broad, holding something low and black that Marin couldn't identify at first, until she realized it wasn't a weapon. It was a camera rig. And behind him, more figures stacked in the corridor, moving in tight formation. Not police uniforms, not random bikers. Dark jackets, earpieces, purposeful. The lead man's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Let her go," he said. The man holding Marin shifted, pulling her tighter into his chest like a shield. His voice turned light, mocking. "You want her? You can have her. Bring me the phone." The lead man didn't blink. "That phone isn't your problem anymore." The hostile laughed. "Everything is my problem." Marin's heart slammed. She felt his arm tighten around her ribcage, crushing air out of her lungs. The lead man lifted his hand slightly, two fingers making a small signal behind him. Marin saw movement in her peripheral, the other figures spreading, taking angles, controlling lines of sight, like they'd rehearsed this room without ever being in it. The hostile noticed, too. His jaw tightened. He pressed his mouth close to Marin's ear, voice a whisper that made her skin crawl. "If they rush me, I break your neck, understand?" Marin couldn't breathe enough to answer. The lead man spoke again, calm as stone. "You're surrounded. Put her down and walk out." The hostile's laugh sounded thin now. "Surrounded by who? Vigilantes? Wash and fold commandos?" The lead man didn't react to the insult. "By people who record," he said simply, "and by people who don't need your permission." For a split second, Marin saw it on the hostile's face. Hesitation, not fear, calculation. He was trying to decide whether this was real or theater. Then, from above, through the ceiling and concrete, came another sound, muffled but unmistakable. Gabe's voice, ragged, shouting. "Marin!" Her name hit her like a hook. She jerked instinctively, and the hostile tightened his grip, pulling her more squarely in front of him. The lead man's eyes flicked upward, then back. "Gabe's alive," he said, almost to himself. The hostile's mouth twitched. "Alive for now." The lead man's gaze hardened. "Last warning." The hostile shifted his stance, dragging Marin another step toward the tarp corridor, angling his body so she blocked more of him. He was trying to retreat with a hostage. The lead man signaled again, smaller this time, barely visible. One of the figures behind him moved, sliding along the wall, stepping into a new angle. Marin's mind screamed, because she understood what that angle meant. A shot line, a takedown. Something was about to happen fast. The hostel seemed to sense it too. He leaned closer to Marin's ear, voice ice. "Say goodbye." And upstairs, the engines outside roared louder again, then suddenly cut one by one like a coordinated shutdown, replaced by the distant wail of sirens finally arriving, late to a party that had already turned into war. The sirens in the distance didn't comfort Marin. They felt late, decorative, like a soundtrack someone added after the real violence already happened. The hostel's arm crushed her tighter, his forearm locked across her upper chest. The zip tie on her wrists bit deeper as she instinctively pulled against it. Her fingers were already numb, like they belonged to someone else. "Say goodbye," he whispered. Marin's breath came in short, broken pulls. She couldn't even turn her head. All she could see was the safe room's harsh white spill light and the lead man in the doorway. Still, calm, eyes fixed on the hostage-taker like he'd already mapped out every muscle twitch and exit line. Behind the lead man, the others held position, not waving guns, not screaming commands, just controlling space, cameras, earpieces, hands low but ready. The lead man spoke, steady. "You're out of angles." The hostel laughed once, thin. "Angles? You want angles? Here's an angle." He jerked Marin sideways, turning her so her face pointed toward the camera rig in the lead man's hands. "Smile, Marin. This is the part where they make you look brave." Her cheeks burned. Tears blurred the room. Marin tried to swallow, but her throat had turned to sand. The lead man didn't react to the bait. He kept his voice flat, almost bored. "Let her go and you walk." "And if I don't?" the hostel asked. The lead man's gaze didn't move. "Then you don't." A soft crackle came from someone's radio outside the room. Quick, coded. "Front secured. Rear secured. 2 vehicles detained. 3rd vehicle fled." The hostel's eyes flicked for the first time, just a quick dart toward the steel door, toward the corridor, toward whatever he could use. His grip tightened on Marin again, as if squeezing answers out of her ribs. He hissed, low. "You called them." Marin couldn't answer. She could barely keep her feet under her. The lead man's mouth moved slightly, not a smile, a decision. He lifted 2 fingers again, a small signal behind him. Someone shifted position, quiet as a shadow. The hostel noticed. His head snapped toward that movement, and in that fraction of distraction, Marin felt a sliver of space open, an inch of looseness in his hold as his attention split. Her body reacted without permission. She stamped her heel hard against his foot. He grunted, surprised, and Marin threw her weight forward, trying to slip out. The zip tie made her balance awkward. Her wrists couldn't catch her fall. She lurched, half falling, half twisting. The hostel yanked her back by the collar like she was a handle. Pain flared across her throat. Her head snapped back. She tasted copper. "Don't!" he snarled in her ear, the kindness gone. "Don't you dare!" He dragged her another step toward the tarp corridor, using her like a moving wall. He was retreating, but not fleeing, repositioning, making the room change around him, making everyone else recalibrate. The lead man's voice sharpened by a degree. "Stop moving!" The hostel kept moving anyway. The lead man's team didn't rush. They tracked, their feet adjusted by inches, keeping angles, not breaking formation. Marin realized with sick clarity they weren't going to panic for her. They were going to do this properly. Upstairs through the concrete, a faint crash echoed, glass or furniture. Then Gabe's voice again, hoarse and furious. "Marin!" The sound tore something open inside her. "Gabe!" She tried to shout back, but it came out a wheeze, strangled by the hostel's forearm. The hostel's mouth pressed close to her ear. "He can't save you. He never could." Then his tone changed. Business. "Bring me the phone," he called toward the doorway, louder now. "You want her breathing? You bring it." The lead man didn't look away from him. "That phone is already duplicated." The hostel's body stiffened. "No." "It is," the lead man said. "You're here for leverage you don't have anymore." For the first time, real emotion flashed across the hostel's face, something like alarm, quick and ugly. He recovered fast, but Marin saw it. He hadn't expected that. He tightened his grip again, as if the only thing he could still control was how much her lungs could expand. "You're lying." The lead man's voice stayed even. "Try me." The hostel stared at him, eyes narrowed, and Marin felt the room tilt into a new kind of danger. If the phone was useless, then she was useless too. Not as a trade, as a message. The hostle's hand slid down her collar, fingers searching along her jacket like he was checking for wires or hidden pockets. Then his hand snapped up, grabbing her hair at the back of her head and yanking it just enough to force her face toward the safe room camera on the tripod. Marin's scalp screamed. "Look at them," he murmured. "Look at how calm they are, like you're already dead." The lead man's gaze hardened. "Don't touch her." "Or what?" The hostile spat louder. "You'll shoot through her? You'll risk it on camera? You'll explain it later?" The lead man didn't answer. He didn't have to. The corridor behind him filled with a new presence, quiet but heavy, like someone stepped into the stack without needing to announce themselves. A woman's voice, the same clipped radio voice Marin had heard earlier, cut through the dust-filled air. "Gabe's down," she said. The lead man's eyes flicked once toward her, then back to the hostel. "Injured?" "Still moving," the woman replied. "But they're pushing him." The hostel's grin returned, cruel. "Hear that? Your boy's bleeding upstairs." Marin's stomach dropped. Gabe, injured, still moving, but pushing him. The lead man didn't blink. "My focus is this room." The hostel laughed again, then looked at Marin as if she were an object that had failed. "You hear that? You're not even his priority." Marin's vision blurred with tears and rage. She couldn't lift her hands, she couldn't fight him, but she could do one thing. She could refuse to collapse. She forced air into her lungs, tiny sips, and stared at the lead man. The lead man's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Marin felt something unmistakable in his gaze, an assurance that wasn't kind, but was absolute. Hold. The hostel misread it. He thought it was weakness. He yanked Marin backward toward the tarp corridor again. "We're leaving," he said, not to her, to the room. "Now." The lead man spoke, calm. "If you cross that threshold, you die." The hostel paused. A beat. 2. Then he smiled, slow. "Then you better shoot." He pulled Marin into the tarp corridor. The moment her body crossed that fabric line, the space changed. The safe room's harsh white light fell off. Shadows thickened. The air smelled different, older, damp, like forgotten concrete. Marin's eyes struggled to adjust. The corridor was narrow, just wide enough for 2 people. The hostel kept her tight against him, pivoting so she stayed between him and whatever could be behind them. Smart. The storage door at the far end was still locked, but beside it, Marin saw something she hadn't processed earlier. A second ceiling panel, the one the hostel had used to enter. The opening above was jagged, torn, and now empty, meaning there was still a path up. The hostel saw her glance and grinned. "Yeah, I've got exits too." He dragged her forward another step. Then the floor under Marin's foot shifted slightly. Not a trap door, a loose panel. A hairline seam. Her instincts screamed, "Something here moves." Before she could think, Marin did something reckless. She dropped her weight hard onto that seam, stomping like she meant to break it. The panel gave a fraction, just enough to throw the hostel's balance off by half a step. His grip loosened again, involuntarily. Marin twisted, trying to slip out, her shoulders scraping the concrete wall. The hostel cursed and smashed her sideways into the corridor wall. Pain exploded in her shoulder. Her vision went white. He shoved her upright, panting now, the first sign he was losing the calm. "You little—" Behind them, in the safe room, the lead man's voice rose, still controlled, but louder, closer. "Move." The word was an order to his team. Marin heard feet shift, quick, decisive. The hostel heard it too. He made a choice. He jammed his hand into his pocket, yanked out something small and black, and pressed it against Marin's ribs. Not a gun. Something sharper in its immediacy, cold, short, pointed. A knife. Marin froze, every muscle locked. The hostel's breath hit her ear, hot and shaking now. No more games. The lead man appeared at the tarp opening, stepping into the corridor's shadow, camera rig still low in his hand, eyes locked on the knife. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch. He just narrowed the distance by 1 step, then stopped. "Put it down," he said. The hostel smiled, but the smile looked strained now. "You want me to put it down? Bring me the phone." "It's not coming," the lead man replied. "Then she is." The knife tip pressed harder. Marin felt the fabric of her hoodie dent against skin. Her knees threatened to fold. The lead man's gaze flicked to Marin's face, his voice softened by a hair. "Marin, don't move." Marin's throat worked. She managed to whisper, I can't." I know, he said. The hostel's voice snapped. Stop talking to her like she's human. The lead man's eyes turned back to him, colder again. You can still walk out. Walk out where? The hostel hissed. Your people? The cops? Cameras? I walk out, I disappear. The lead man's voice stayed steady. That's the first honest thing you've said. The hostel's jaw clenched. He glanced upward at the torn ceiling panel like a man measuring his last option. Then his gaze darted back to the loose floor seam Marin had stomped on, and Marin realized he'd seen it too. A hidden panel. Another route. The hostel's grip tightened around her collar, dragging her toward that seam. Fine, he said, fast. We'll go down. The words hit Marin like a nightmare. Down where? She tried to plant her feet. The knife pressed again. She moved. The hostel kicked at the edge of the loose panel, testing it with his boot. It shifted, more than before. A disguised access cover. He grinned, breath coming faster. Oh, Gabe, you really do have a whole maze. He shifted his weight, preparing to force it open. And behind Marin, above everything, the sound of engines returned again. This time, not roaring in, but revving hard and peeling away, like someone had decided they didn't like the way this was going. The hostel's head snapped toward the noise, distracted for a fraction of a second. The lead man moved. Not a lunge, not a tackle, a precise step like he'd been waiting for that exact split in attention. His hand shot out, not toward the hostel's face, but toward the knife wrist. Marin felt the blade twitch against her ribs as the grip was disrupted. The hostel reacted instantly, jerking back and wrenching Marin with him, trying to reseat her as a shield. And in that split second, the loose panel under their feet popped, the edge lifting just enough for a dark gap to open like a mouth beneath them, sucking cold air up into the corridors. Marin's foot slipped, and her balance vanished, and she fell, straight into the opening as the knife flashed down after her. Marin fell, and the world turned into cold air and darkness. For half a second, she didn't understand what happened, only that her foot slipped, the floor vanished, and her stomach lurched up into her throat. The corridor above shrank into a jagged rectangle of shadow and dust, and the sound of voices stretched thin like tape. She hit hard on her side, shoulder first, bouncing off something angled, then slamming onto gritty concrete. Pain detonated across her ribs. Her breath left in one violent gasp, and for a moment she couldn't pull it back in. Above her, the opening framed a slice of dim light and movement. The hostel's face appeared at the edge, distorted by angle and dust. His eyes were wide, not with fear, with irritation, like she'd slipped out of his hand and he wanted to correct the mistake. Then the knife flashed, a thin, sharp glint as he leaned down and stabbed toward the darkness, not aiming to hit her cleanly, aiming to keep her pinned, to make her freeze where she landed. The blade struck concrete inches from Marin's cheek with a nasty metallic scrape. Sparks jumped. The sound made her whole body recoil. She rolled instinctively, ignoring the pain, sliding into deeper shadow. The knife ripped back up, then came down again, not as close this time, but close enough to make her understand. He didn't need to see her perfectly to hurt her. She forced air into her lungs in tiny, wheezing sips and crawled. The space she'd fallen into wasn't a clean tunnel like the safe room. It was older, rough, a service void. A forgotten channel under the building, concrete ribs, damp stains, pipes running in parallel like veins. Cold air poured through it, carrying a smell of wet stone and rust. Behind her, above, voices collided. The lead man's tone, controlled but louder now. Back off the edge, the hostel snapped. Or what? A scuffle, fabric tearing, a grunt of pain. Then something heavy slammed against the corridor wall above, and the opening shook, dust raining down into Marin's hair. She crawled faster, dragging her zip-tied hands awkwardly, elbows scraping. The tie cut into her wrists with every movement. She needed to get away from that opening before he decided to jump down after her. She looked for direction and found it in the simplest thing: airflow. The cold pull came from the left, stronger, like an exit or a larger chamber. To the right, the tunnel deadened, air still, the kind of place you crawl into and don't crawl out of. She went left. Her knees hit water, shallow, freezing. It soaked through instantly. Marin bit back a cry and kept moving, teeth chattering now, not only from fear. Behind, the opening above was still visible for a few more seconds as she crawled, light shrinking, voices muffled. Then she heard a new sound that made her stomach flip. A boot hit concrete below. The hostile had jumped. He landed with a heavy thud that echoed through the tunnel. For a beat there was silence, him orienting, listening, eyes adjusting. Then his voice floated into the darkness, low and confident. "Marin," she froze instinctively, then forced herself not to. He wanted her to freeze. She crawled again, faster, splashing through shallow water. The tunnel widened slightly, enough that she could hunch and shuffle instead of crawl. Pipes overhead dripped steadily, and every drip sounded like footsteps to her. Behind her, she heard the hostile move, not sprinting, walking, the sound of someone who believed the chase was already over. "You don't know when to stop," he called softly. "You keep making me do it the ugly way." Marin swallowed blood and water and panic. Her shoulders screamed with every movement, the one he'd smashed into the wall earlier. Her ribs felt bruised, maybe cracked, but if she stopped, she was done. Ahead, the tunnel bent and opened into a wider cavity, an access junction. Old electrical boxes lined the wall, rusted and tagged. A metal ladder ran upward into darkness, disappearing into a round hatch. Marin stared at the ladder like it was salvation. She limped toward it and then stopped, dread catching. Going up meant another unknown door, another locked hatch, another trap, but staying down here meant him. Her hands were still zip-tied. Climbing would be nearly impossible. Behind her, the hostile's footsteps stopped, as if he'd reached the bend and was watching her shape in the dim. "Good," he murmured, cornered. Marin turned slightly, keeping her back to the ladder, and saw him in the gloom. He held the knife low now, relaxed, like he wasn't in a hurry anymore. His breathing was steady. His eyes reflected faint light in a way that made them look almost metallic. "You had help," he said, voice conversational. "That little camera crew, the radio lady, cute. But you know what's funny?" He took a slow step forward, water rippling around his boots. "None of them are down here with you." Marin's throat locked. He came another step closer, and Marin's mind searched for weapons, pipe, rock, anything. Her gaze landed on a broken metal conduit on the ground near the wall, jagged edge, sharp. She shifted her foot toward it, subtle. The hostile noticed everything. His eyes dipped to her movement, and his smile sharpened. "Don't," he warned, still soft. "I'm not in the mood for bravery." He raised the knife slightly, not pointing it yet, showing it. Marin's heart hammered. She forced herself to breathe through her nose, slow, like Gabe had told her earlier. Then the tunnel behind the hostile flashed with a brief burst of light, someone's flashlight sweeping. The hostile's head snapped around. Marin's breath caught. Another voice echoed faintly from the direction he'd come, male and urgent, not the lead man's voice. Target went down. Basement channel, move. The hostile swore under his breath, the first real crack in his composure. He hadn't expected pursuit into the underspace. He turned back to Marin fast, eyes colder now. "Change of plan!" He lunged. Marin reacted on pure instinct. She snatched the broken conduit with her foot, kicked it up, and caught it awkwardly between her bound hands like a clumsy bat. The jagged metal bit into her palm. Pain flared. She didn't care. The hostile swung the knife toward her ribs. Marin swung the conduit with everything she had. Metal hit forearm with a dull crack. The hostile grunted, more surprised than hurt, and the knife skittered off trajectory, slicing her hoodie instead of her skin. The fabric tore with a ripping sound, cold air hitting her side. Marin screamed and swung again. This time, she caught him across the wrist. The knife flew from his hand, clattering into the shallow water and sliding out of sight. For one bright second, Marin felt something like hope. Then the hostile's face changed. He didn't panic. He didn't back off. He smiled. "You just made it worse," he whispered. He slammed into her, driving his shoulder into her chest. Marin flew back into the ladder, pain exploding through her spine. The rungs rattled. Her head hit metal with a sickening clang, and stars burst behind her eyes. He pinned her against the ladder with one hand, crushing air out of her. His other hand shot down into the water, feeling for the knife blindly like a man retrieving keys he'd dropped. Marin tried to bring the conduit up again, but with her wrists tied and her back jammed against the ladder, she had no leverage. Her arms trembled uselessly. The hostile's fingers closed around something in the water. He drew up the knife. Marin's blood turned to ice. He lifted it slowly, savoring her fear now that he'd earned it. "See," he murmured, "you can't win. You can only delay." He pressed the knife tip to her ribs, right where the hoodie had torn. The cold point found skin. Marin's breath came out as a broken sound, and then, from above, right above her, something moved. The hatch at the top of the ladder rattled. The hostel froze, knife still on her skin, eyes flicking upward. The hatch cover shifted, then lifted a fraction, letting a blade of light slice down the ladder shaft. A voice came from above, muffled but clear. "Marin, don't move!" Gabe. Marin's eyes flooded instantly. The hostel's face tightened in fury. "Of course," he hissed, "the hero shows up." He yanked Marin off the ladder by her collar and dragged her a step away, repositioning again, always keeping her between him and the threat above. The hatch lifted wider. Light poured down, brighter now, and Marin saw the edge of a hand and the outline of a head peering in. Gabe's breathing sounded ragged, like he'd run on a broken body to get here. His voice was tight with pain. "Let her go," he said. The hostel laughed, but it sounded forced now. "You should have stayed upstairs, Gabe." Gabe didn't answer. Marin could hear him shifting, trying to climb down with injury. The hostel pressed the knife harder into Marin's ribs, enough to sting. "Come down," he called up, voice sweet. "Come save her." Gabe's silhouette moved. He was starting down, and Marin realized the hostel wanted that. He wanted Gabe in the tunnel, away from cameras, away from teams, away from witnesses. The hostel's mouth brushed Marin's ear, voice like poison. "If he comes down," he whispered, "I kill you first." Marin's whole body went rigid. Above, Gabe's boot found the first rung. The ladder creaked under his weight, and the hostel's knife began to press in as Marin stared up into the light, unable to breathe, unable to scream, watching Gabe descend into the dark. Gabe came down the ladder like every rung hurt. Marin could hear it in the way his boot searched before it committed, in the tiny pauses between movements, in the rasp of his breath that didn't match the slow, controlled descent he was forcing himself to maintain. Light from above framed him in harsh slices, face half shadow, half lit, eyes locked on Marin with a focus so intense it almost felt like a hand on her shoulder. The hostel watched him descend with an expression that wasn't fear. It was satisfaction. "Careful," the hostel called up softly. "You slip, you fall, you break your neck. That'd be tragic." Gabe didn't answer. He kept coming, one rung at a time, jaw clenched hard enough to show muscle jumping near his temple. His right hand gripped the ladder side, knuckles white. His left, Marin saw it, was trembling, not from fear, from strain. He was hurt. The hostel leaned close to Marin's ear and breathed, "He's bleeding for you." Marin's throat worked. She couldn't even swallow. The knife tip was still pressed into her ribs, cold against skin. Every time she inhaled, it kissed deeper, a reminder that breathing was a negotiation. Gabe's boot hit the wet concrete at the bottom. He stepped off the ladder and stood still for a beat, letting his eyes adjust, letting the pain settle into a place he could ignore. His shoulders rose and fell once, slow. Then he took one step toward them. "Stop," the hostel warned, light and friendly. Gabe stopped. In the dim, Marin saw Gabe's jacket, torn near the shoulder, darkened with wetness that wasn't rain. Blood, dried and fresh mixed, like the night had been chewing him for a while. Gabe's gaze flicked to Marin's wrists, the zip tie biting into her skin, then to the knife. His eyes sharpened. His voice came out low and flat. "Let her go." The hostel smiled. "You say that like you have leverage." Gabe's mouth barely moved. "You're in my tunnels." The hostel laughed softly. "Your tunnels, your laundromat, your little safe room. You're adorable, Gabe. You build a maze and call it control." Gabe didn't blink. "Where's your other guy?" The hostel's smile didn't change, but his eyes did. Quick flicker, calculation. "Busy." Marin's heart hammered. There was someone else down here? Or was that a bluff to pull Gabe's focus? Gabe's gaze stayed on the hostel's face, not drifting, not giving away that he cared. "The people outside," Gabe said. "They got your cars." The hostel shrugged. "Cars are replaceable." Gabe's voice stayed even. "Girls aren't." The hostel pressed the knife a fraction harder into Marin's ribs. She hissed through her teeth, body going rigid. Gabe's eyes flicked to the knife tip, and for the first time the calm in his face cracked. Just a hairline fracture of rage. The hostel saw it and enjoyed it. "That's the face," he murmured. "That's the one I remember." Gabe's jaw tightened. What do you want? The hostel's smile widened, teeth showing now. The phone. Gabe didn't move. It's not here. Then bring it, the hostel said, voice sharpening. Or I make her stop breathing and you can explain to your camera friends why your maze didn't save her. Marin's vision blurred. She felt Gabe's attention on her now, not as a symbol or a package, but as a person who could die in the next breath. Gabe's voice softened, just enough for her. Marin, look at me. Marin forced her eyes to Gabe's. Breathe shallow, he said quietly. Don't fight, don't twist. Marin nodded, tears spilling. The hostel scoffed. Coaching, cute, you think you're a dad now? Gabe's gaze stayed on Marin. When I say drop, he murmured, you drop. Marin's heart stuttered. Drop where? Drop how? The hostel heard the word and tightened his grip instantly, pulling Marin closer into him as if he could crush the instruction out of her. He hissed, no. Gabe finally lifted his eyes to the hostel. You're not walking out. The hostel's smile vanished completely. Then neither is she. He jerked Marin backward toward the ladder, knife still pressed to her ribs. The movement made Marin stumble. Her bound wrist couldn't catch her. The hostel kept her upright by her collar like she was a jacket on a hook. Gabe took one step forward. The hostel snapped. Stop! Gabe stopped again, but this time he didn't look obedient. He looked like he was measuring. The hostel shifted his weight, angling so Marin's body blocked more of him. You know what happens next, he said. You bring me the phone, or I bleed her out in your tunnel and nobody sees it but you. Gabe's eyes didn't move from the hostel's face. You think I don't have eyes down here? The hostel blinked once, a tiny involuntary reaction. Gabe's voice stayed steady. You came through the ceiling panel like it was a secret. It wasn't. I knew. Marin's breath caught. Gabe knew. Then why? The hostel recovered, scoffing. And yet here we are. Gabe's gaze flicked upward to the ladder shaft in the open hatch. A slice of light from above still poured down, but it wasn't stable. It shifted, as if someone up there was moving, watching. Then Gabe said, very quietly, You're being recorded. The hostel laughed, harsh. By what? Dust? Rats? Gabe didn't answer. His eyes dropped to Marin's bound wrists again, then to the broken conduit on the floor near the ladder base, then to the shallow water. Marin realized he was building a picture, a sequence. The hostel sensed it and made another move. He slid Marin half a step, planting her between Gabe and the ladder as if he wanted to control Gabe's route. The knife tip dug. Marin whimpered. Gabe's face tightened. He spoke again, low. You're not getting the phone. The hostel's voice snapped, furious now. Then you're getting a corpse. He yanked Marin's head back by her hair, exposing her throat. Marin's heart stopped. Gabe moved, not a rush, not a tackle. A small, violent, precise motion. He flicked his hand and something arced through the air. Tiny, metallic, fast. Marin didn't register it until it hit. A sharp clink against the hostel's face, just under his eye. Not a blade, a coin, a small washer, something thrown like a distraction. The hostel flinched instinctively, head turning. In that instant, Gabe stepped in. His hand shot to the hostel's knife wrist and slammed it sideways into the ladder rail. Metal rang. The knife slipped, cutting air, not skin. Marin felt space open, 1 inch, then 2. Gabe's other hand grabbed Marin's zip-tied wrists and yanked them down hard, forcing her to drop her center of gravity exactly as he'd coached. Drop! Gabe barked. Marin folded, knees buckling, body dropping like a stone. The hostel tried to follow the movement, tried to keep the knife on her, but Marin's sudden drop exposed his ribs. Gabe drove an elbow into the hostel's side with brutal precision. The hostel grunted, air leaving him. He stumbled a half step. Gabe didn't let him recover. Gabe slammed his shoulder into the hostel's chest, pinning him back against the ladder. The knife hand flailed. The blade scraped against ladder metal with a shriek. Marin scrambled backward on her knees, bound hands in front of her, gasping, eyes wide with disbelief. For 1 second, Gabe had him. Then the hostel did something ugly. He headbutted Gabe. The impact was wet and heavy. Gabe's head snapped back. Blood flashed in the dim. Maybe Gabe's, maybe both. Gabe staggered, grip loosening. The hostel shoved him off hard, snarling now, all calm, gone. He swung the knife blindly toward Gabe's stomach. Gabe twisted, but not fast enough. The blade caught Gabe's jacket and tore fabric, slicing across skin. Gabe sucked in a breath through clenched teeth. pain flashing across his face. Marin made a broken sound. The hostile turned his head toward her, eyes wild now. "Stay down," he hissed, then stepped toward her, knife raised. Gabe's voice cracked, harsh. "Marin, move!" Marin tried. Her bound hands made her clumsy. She crawled backward, boots slipping in water. The hostile lunged, and from above, through the ladder shaft, something dropped. A bright cylinder fell fast, bounced once and hit the wet concrete near the hostile's feet. A flashbang, a flare. It detonated with a blinding white burst and a brutal crack that punched the air. Marin screamed, ears ringing instantly. The hostile recoiled, eyes squeezed shut, knife arm flailing. Gabe didn't waste it. He surged forward, grabbed the hostile's knife wrist again, and slammed it down hard onto the concrete. Bone cracked. The hostile screamed. Finally, a real scream. The knife skittered away into the water. Gabe kicked it out of reach and stepped back, breathing ragged, blood running down from his forehead. Above, the hatch light shifted as a figure leaned in. The female voice echoed down, sharp and commanding. "Gabe, status!" Gabe stared at the hostile, who was on one knee, clutching his broken wrist, face twisted with hate. Gabe's voice came out hoarse. "He's down. For now." The hostile looked up at Gabe, smiling through pain, eyes bright with something sick. "You think this ends here?" he rasped. "You think I'm the whole problem?" Gabe didn't answer. He grabbed Marin by her bound wrists gently but fast, pulling her to her feet. Marin's ears still rang from the blast. Her vision swam. She could barely stand. Gabe looked at her, eyes intense. "Can you climb?" Marin shook, tears spilling. "My hands." "I know," Gabe snapped, then softened by a hair. "You have to." He hauled her toward the ladder, guiding her to the first rung. Marin tried to hook her bound hands around it. It barely worked. Above, the female voice again, urgent now. "Gabe, move. Second hostile inbound. We lost him in the lower channel." Gabe's head snapped up. "Where?" "Heading toward your ladder access," she said. "He knows your exits." Marin's blood went cold. Gabe shoved Marin upward. "Climb!" Marin forced herself up one rung, then another, shaking so hard her legs nearly missed. Below, the hostile on the ground lifted his head and smiled wider, breath hissing through teeth. "Too slow," he whispered. And from the darkness of the tunnel behind them, a new set of footsteps splashed through water, fast, closing, coming straight for the base of the ladder. The footsteps in the tunnel were wrong. Not the cautious, patient pace of the hostile with the knife. These were fast, wet, committed, boots splashing through shallow water like the person didn't care who heard, like the chase mattered more than stealth now. Marin's bound hands slipped on the ladder rung. Her forearms trembled so violently she nearly lost her grip. "Climb!" Gabe barked from below, voice raw. "Don't look down!" She couldn't help it. She looked. Gabe stood at the ladder base, shoulders squared, blood running down his face into his collar. Behind him, the first hostile was still on one knee, clutching his broken wrist, teeth bared in a grin that wasn't joy. It was prediction. And out of the darkness of the lower tunnel, a second figure emerged, moving hard and fast, flashlight beam knifing through dust and water. The beam hit Gabe. Stopped. The second man didn't slow. He lifted something with both hands, short, dark, mechanical. Not a knife. A handgun. Marin's stomach dropped. "Gabe!" The female voice above shouted down the shaft, distorted by distance and ringing in Marin's ears. "Move! He's got—" The gun cracked. The sound in the concrete tunnel was brutal, like the air itself broke. Marin flinched so hard her bound hands slipped. Her body jerked, knees knocking the ladder rungs. For a heartbeat she was sure she was falling. Gabe moved at the same time the shot fired. He threw himself sideways, grabbing the ladder rail with one hand and yanking his body behind it, using the ladder frame as cover. The bullet sparked off metal with a sharp ping, ricochet whining into darkness. Marin screamed, silent at first, only breath, then a thin, broken sound. "Keep climbing!" Gabe roared. Marin forced her hands higher, one rung at a time. The zip tie cut deep enough that her fingers tingled with pins and needles. Below, the second man advanced, gun up, flashlight in his offhand. His beam flicked along the ladder shaft, caught Marin's legs climbing, then snapped down to Gabe. He wasn't panicked. He looked trained too, just a different kind. "Drop the girl," he said, voice flat. "Step away." Gabe didn't answer. He shifted his weight, trying to position himself so the ladder stayed between Marin and the gun. The first hostile, broken wrist, laughed through his teeth. "Told you," he rasped, enjoying the chaos. "Too slow." The second man's flashlight beam swung and landed on him. "Shut up," the second man snapped, then refocused on Gabe. "Where's the phone?" Gabe's eyes flashed. "Not here." The second man's mouth tightened. "Then you're wasting my time." He raised the gun again. Gabe grabbed a loose length of cable along the wall, an old conduit line, and yanked hard. Something overhead sparked, and the tunnel lights, if they could be called that, flickered, then died for a half-second, plunging everything into deeper shadow. The second man cursed, beam swinging wildly. That half-second was enough. Gabe lunged, not toward the gun, toward the man's flashlight arm, slammed it down and sideways, forcing the beam to miss and the gun to angle away. Another shot fired, deafening, and the bullet punched into concrete, spraying grit. Marin climbed, shaking, eyes stinging from dust. Above, the hatch was brighter now. Voices echoed, more than one, tight and urgent. "Gabe, climb now! Marin is almost up! Move! We're dropping a line!" A rope suddenly slithered down the ladder shaft, thick, nylon with a loop at the end. It slapped against the rungs and swung. Marin's bound hands couldn't grab it properly. She tried anyway, hooking the loop over her wrist like a handcuff. "Pull!" someone above shouted. The rope jerked upward, lifting Marin's upper body. Pain lanced through her shoulders, but it also gave her leverage. She scrambled, legs doing most of the work now, climbing with desperate speed as the rope tension took some weight. Below, Gabe and the second man collided hard. The second man drove his shoulder into Gabe's injured side. Gabe grunted, staggering. The gun skittered against Gabe's ribs as the man tried to bring it up again. Gabe trapped the gun wrist with both hands and slammed it into the ladder rail. Metal rang. The gun fired once more, but the shot went wide, blasting into the tunnel wall. The recoil jolted the second man's grip loose. The gun dropped. It hit the wet concrete with a splash. For a heartbeat, both men saw it at the same time. The first hostile, broken wrist, reacted with a feral lunge, trying to reach it with his good hand, eyes bright with greed. The second man kicked him back without looking, boot to chest, sending him coughing into the water. Gabe dove for the gun. The second man dove too. Their hands hit it almost together. Gabe's fingers wrapped the grip. The second man grabbed the slide and barrel, twisting. They wrestled in silence except for breath and water and the sick scrape of metal. Marin was nearly at the top now. Light blinded her eyes. She could see hands reaching down, gloved hands, steady hands. "Marin, give me your wrists," a woman shouted. Marin lifted her bound hands. The woman grabbed her forearms and hauled. Marin's body tipped out of the shaft onto solid floor above, onto a hard surface that felt like salvation. She collapsed, gasping, ears ringing. But she couldn't stop looking at the hole. Because Gabe wasn't up yet. Below, the struggle for the gun ended in a brutal twist. Gabe wrenched the weapon free and jammed it upward, pointing it directly at the second man's chest at point-blank range. The second man froze. So did Gabe. For a full second, nothing moved except breath. Then, the second man said quietly, "You won't." Gabe's face, bloodied, exhausted, didn't show doubt. It showed decision. But he didn't shoot. Instead, he did something worse for the second man. He swung the gun sideways and smashed the butt into the man's temple. The second man went limp, collapsing into the water with a heavy splash. Gabe stood over him, chest heaving. Above, the female voice shouted down the shaft, furious. "Gabe, now!" Gabe grabbed the ladder with one hand, starting to climb. And behind him, the first hostile, still grinning through pain, whispered something that cut through everything. "He's not dead," he said. Gabe's head snapped toward the second man. Too late. The second man surged up from the water with sudden violence, hands shooting out, grabbing Gabe's ankle and yanking. Gabe's foot slipped off the rung. His body jolted downward. Marin screamed from above, lunging toward the hole, but hands grabbed her shoulders and held her back. Gabe slammed against the ladder frame, pain ripping through him. The second man dragged him down, trying to pull him away from the climb, away from light, away from witnesses. And from the darkness behind them, the first hostile laughed again, breathy and delighted, like the night had finally turned the way he wanted. "Now," he rasped, "we do it without cameras." Marin fought the hands holding her back. "Let me, Gabe!" Her voice tore out of her, raw, cracking on the last syllable. The woman who'd hauled her up, dark jacket, earpiece, eyes like steel, kept one palm firm on Marin's shoulder and the other on her bound wrists. Don't, she snapped. You go down there, you die. Marin twisted anyway, staring into the shaft. Light from above poured down the ladder, but it didn't reach the bottom now, only caught flashes. Gabe's jacket, a boot slipping, water splashing as he was yanked off the rung. Below, Gabe hit hard, shoulder and ribs slamming into the ladder frame. He choked on a breath, then roared something. More pain than words. The second man had his ankle locked in both hands, dragging him backward into the tunnel like hauling a body off a stage. And the first hostile, broken wrist still smiling, watched it like entertainment. Now, he rasped again, we do it without cameras. The woman above barked into her mic. He's being pulled into the lower channel. I need 2 down. Now, a man beside her, broad camera rig still strapped, glanced at the woman. It's too tight. We go in, we lose the ladder. Then we don't lose it, she snapped. Line down, keep him on rope. Someone tossed a second rope toward the shaft. It slapped the floor near Marin's knees. Another person clipped something onto it. Carabiner, loop, quick hands. Marin, the woman said, turning back to her, stand up. Marin's legs wobbled. She rose, bound hands held out like she was surrendering. The woman pulled a small tool from her pocket, wire cutter or compact snips. She slid it under the zip tie. Marin felt the plastic tighten one last time, then snap. The tie fell away. Blood rushed into Marin's hands in painful prickles. She flexed her fingers, shocked by how much it hurt to feel again. Can you hold? The woman demanded. Marin didn't understand. The woman shoved the rope into Marin's hands, wrapping it once around her palm. If Gabe grabs this, you anchor. Do you understand? You don't let go. Marin's eyes filled. I can't. You can, the woman cut in, because if you drop him, he's gone. Marin nodded, jaw trembling, and gripped the rope until her knuckles whitened. The woman leaned over the shaft and shouted down, voice amplified by concrete. Gabe! Rope! Below, chaos echoed, splashes, grunts, a body slamming into pipe, metal ringing as someone collided with the ladder base. Gabe's voice came faintly, ragged. A harsh odor cut him off, someone striking him, or the tunnel striking him. Then the second man's voice rose, breathy and fast. Move him! Move him! The first hostile laughed, then coughed, then laughed again like it hurt and he didn't care. Phone! He rasped. Where's the phone, Gabe? Tell me and I'll make it quick. Marin's stomach turned. She leaned over the shaft, hands shaking, and saw a brief flash of movement. Gabe's hand reaching, searching blindly upward. The rope's free end dropped down, swinging. Gabe's fingers caught it for half a second, slipped, then caught again. Got it! Marin screamed and yanked back, anchoring with her whole body like she was pulling a drowning man from black water. The rope went taut. Below, Gabe's body jerked, saved from being dragged fully into the tunnel, held at the edge of the ladder base like a fish on a line. The second man cursed. Cut it! The hostile's laugh sharpened. No! Bring him! I want him awake! A flashlight beam cut across the shaft from above, someone aiming it down. For a second, Marin saw Gabe clearer, face blood-smeared, eyes wide with focus, one hand gripping rope, the other braced on concrete as the second man hauled at his ankle. Gabe's jaw clenched. He was trying to crawl toward the ladder while being pulled the other way. Marin dug her heels into the floor and pulled harder. Pain ripped through her arms. She could feel the rope bite into her palms. The woman barked into her mic again. 2 down now. If you wait, we lose him. A man stepped to the shaft with a compact harness already on. Another clipped in behind him. They moved with practiced speed, no hesitation. Light on, the woman ordered, and keep the camera rolling. The broad man with the rig adjusted, aiming downward. Marin realized then they weren't just trying to save Gabe. They were documenting everything, every movement, every voice. Chain of custody, proof. The hostel below had been right about one thing. Cameras mattered. The first rescuer slid onto the ladder, descending fast, controlled, boots finding rungs with quick precision. The second followed 2 rungs behind. Marin's arms shook from holding the rope taut. Sweat slicked her palms despite the cold air rising from the shaft. Below, the second man saw the descending figures and reacted instantly. He yanked Gabe hard, trying to pull him into the tunnel before help arrived. Gabe's body slid an inch. Marin screamed through clenched teeth and pulled back with everything she had. The rope burned her skin. The first rescuer reached the bottom and stepped off the ladder into the wet, shadowy space. He drew something, not a gun. A bright handheld light and a compact baton-like tool. "Hands!" he shouted. The second man turned, gunless now, but still dangerous, and slammed his shoulder into the rescuer. The rescuer staggered, nearly losing footing in water. The second rescuer dropped down, landing beside the ladder base, and moved toward Gabe, trying to secure him to the rope line. Gabe coughed, eyes wild. "Knife!" he rasped. "Other one!" The first hostile, broken wrist shifted in the shadows like a snake waking. He wasn't down. He was waiting. He surged up from near the wall, moving with his good hand low and fast, and Marin saw the glint. He'd retrieved the knife again at some point, or he had another one. The knife flashed toward the rescuer's side. The rescuer saw it too late. Gabe moved on pure instinct. Even half-dragged, even bleeding, he lunged sideways and slammed his forearm into the hostile's knife arm, knocking it offline. The blade grazed fabric instead of flesh. The hostile snarled, face contorting. "You won't die, will you?" The second man took advantage of the distraction and grabbed the rope where it connected to Gabe's hand, trying to rip it free. Marin felt the tension change immediately, a violent tug through the line that nearly pulled her forward into the shaft. She dropped to her knees, anchoring her weight, wrapping the rope around her forearm again. "I've got him!" she screamed. The woman above shouted, voice tight, "Hold, hold!" The camera rig's light flooded the lower space again, and for a second, Marin saw all of them at once. Gabe on the ground, one rescuer trying to clip a harness onto him, the second man fighting for control, the first hostile circling with the knife like a shark. Then everything snapped into motion. The first rescuer swung his baton-like tool, not a strike, a controlled jab into the second man's forearm nerve. The second man flinched, grip loosening. The second rescuer hooked the harness clip onto Gabe's jacket strap and locked it with a hard click. "Gabe, stay still," the rescuer commanded. Gabe's mouth twisted. "Hard to—" He coughed blood, then locked his jaw and did it anyway, forcing his body to go limp so they could secure him. The hostile with the knife lunged again, this time toward Gabe's throat. Marin's heart stopped. The first rescuer intercepted, stepping in and taking the knife arm with both hands, wrenching it up and away. The hostile screamed through clenched teeth, but he didn't let go. The second man seized the moment, grabbed Gabe by the boot and yanked again, trying to pull him free from the harness before the line could lift. The rope in Marin's hands jerked so hard, her shoulders screamed. Above, the woman shouted into her mic, voice turning to pure command. "Pull! Pull now!" Marin didn't wait for anyone else. She leaned back and hauled. The rope tightened, the harness held. Gabe's body slid toward the ladder base, scraping over wet concrete. The second man dug in, pulling the opposite way, but now he was fighting a line under tension, and Marin and the woman and whoever else was on the other end above. Gabe's head bumped the ladder rail. He grunted but didn't lose consciousness. The hostile with the knife twisted, trying to break the rescuer's grip. The knife edge flashed dangerously close to the rescuer's wrist, and then the second rescuer made a hard choice. He kicked the knife. Not at the hostile's hand, at the blade itself, using the slick water to send it skittering. The knife flew out of the hostile's grip and slid across the wet concrete into darkness with a metallic hiss. The hostile's eyes went wide, furious. The second man cursed, because without the knife, his partner had lost the fastest threat. And in that split second of imbalance, the rope line surged. Gabe's body lifted just enough to unweight the drag. Marin felt it, felt the shift from dead weight to movement. She pulled again, sobbing now, muscles screaming, rope burning her palms. Gabe rose up the ladder shaft a foot, 2 feet. The second man grabbed at Gabe's ankle again, but his hands slipped on wet fabric. Gabe's boot slid free. And as Gabe's body started to ascend, the first hostile looked up into the shaft light, into cameras, into witnesses, and his face changed from fury to something colder. He backed into the darkness, disappearing like he'd never been there. Marin kept pulling, eyes locked on the shaft. Because Gabe was coming up. But the tunnel below was now swallowing one enemy whole, and the other had just decided to vanish into the maze. Gabe's boots scraped the ladder rungs as the rope hauled him up. Marin pulled until her arms shook so violently she thought her muscles would tear off the bone. The rope burned her palms raw. She didn't care. She couldn't care. All she could see was Gabe's blood-smeared face rising into the light in broken, stuttering increments, 1 foot, 2 feet, like the shaft was trying to hold him. Keep tension, the woman barked, braced beside Marin, one hand on the rope behind hers, the other pressed to her mic. He's coming up. Don't let him swing. Gabe's head bumped the rim of the hatch opening. He grunted, eyes half-lidded, then forced them open and locked onto Marin. Marin, he rasped, voice shredded. I'm here, Marin choked. I've got you. Two hands reached down, gloved, caught Gabe under the arms and yanked. Gabe's body rolled onto the floor above with a heavy thud. For a second, he lay there, chest heaving, rainwater and blood mixing into a dark smear on the concrete. Marin dropped to her knees beside him, rope falling slack, hands shaking so hard she couldn't unclench them. Gabe's eyes flicked over her, wrists, ribs, face, as if checking what was still intact. You okay? He whispered. Marin tried to answer and only made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The woman snapped, Move him off the hatch, now. We're not safe here. Two of her people grabbed Gabe by the shoulders and dragged him back from the opening. Gabe tried to push himself up, stubborn even in pain. Down, the woman ordered him. You did your part. Gabe's jaw tightened. He got away, he rasped. The woman didn't pretend she didn't understand. One did. One's pinned below with our guys. We're tracking the runner. Marin's blood went cold. Tracking? How? The woman's eyes cut to her. Because your friend here built a maze with cameras. Gabe coughed, then gave Marin a look. Apology and urgency tangled. I told you. Eyes. Marin's stomach twisted. Gabe hadn't just been protecting a laundromat. He'd built an infrastructure. Overhead, the building shuddered with distant movement. Boots on floors above, voices echoing through concrete. Someone shouted from a radio in the corridor, Front is compromised. We've got law enforcement arriving and they're not with us. The woman's face hardened instantly. Of course, Marin blinked. Cops aren't with you? The woman didn't answer that directly. She spoke into her mic, voice tight. Switch to Protocol 3. All cameras stay on. No one goes dark. A man with the camera rig stepped closer, the lens already pointed. Marin saw the small screen on the side. Live feed, timestamp, audio levels, everything, proof in real time. Gabe pushed himself halfway upright, wincing. Marin, he said low. They're going to try to flip this. Flip what? Marin whispered. Gabe's eyes flicked toward the shaft, then toward the corridor. He's not just a guy with a knife. He has paperwork, badges, friends. The woman cut in, blunt. He has people in uniforms, and he knows how to make a victim look like a criminal. Marin's skin prickled. Like he did with me. Gabe nodded once. Exactly. The corridor filled with noise, approaching footsteps, heavy and confident. A flashlight beam swept the doorway. A man's voice called out, loud and authoritative. Police! Everyone step away from the hatch and put your hands where I can see them. Marin's chest tightened so hard she couldn't breathe. The woman stood, not raising her hands, not lowering them either, neutral, controlled. Officer, she called back, voice level. This is a private investigation. We have a minor victim. We have recorded evidence. Private investigation, the officer repeated, skeptical, sharp. You mean vigilante activity? The camera rig man shifted, angling so the officer's voice was caught cleanly. The woman spoke again, measured. We're preserving evidence and protecting the victim until proper authorities, federal, arrive. The officer stepped into view. He wasn't alone. Two more uniforms behind him, hands near their belts, eyes sweeping the room and stopping on Marin, on Gabe, on the rope, on the hatch. Then, the officer's gaze landed on Gabe. Recognition flickered. Gabe, the officer said, tone changing. What the hell is this? Gabe's face went still. He didn't look surprised, which scared Marin more than surprise would have. The officer took another step in. You've got people with cameras. You've got ropes. You've got somebody bleeding, and you've got a kid. You want to explain why I shouldn't put cuffs on everyone in this room? The woman's jaw tightened. We have the suspect's voice on audio, threatening to break fingers. We have forced entry, hostage, weapons. The officer's eyes flicked to the camera rig with open irritation. Turn that off. The cameraman didn't move. The officer's tone snapped. Turn it off, now. The woman said, calm as ice. No. The officer stared at her. Then his gaze slid back to Marin, softer now, like he was switching tactics. Hey, he said to Marin gently. Sweetheart. Are you okay? Did these people kidnap you? Marin's throat closed. It was the same shape of lie the pursuer used, just cleaner, more official. Marin glanced at Gabe. Gabe's eyes held hers, steady. The officer continued, voice warm. "If you need help, just say so. We'll get you away from them." The woman's fingers twitched near her mic, but she didn't interrupt. She let the officer talk, let it record, let him show his angle. Marin's mouth opened. No words came. Then a new voice cut through from behind the uniforms, someone arriving fast, breathless. "Sergeant, rear alley unit just found an unconscious male in the lower channel. He's claiming he was assaulted by Gabe and his crew." Marin's stomach dropped. The officer's face hardened. "Unconscious male." The woman's eyes narrowed. "He was armed." The officer ignored her. He pointed at Gabe. "You, on your knees." Gabe didn't move. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," the officer snapped. "Knees, now." Marin's hands trembled. "He saved me." The officer's gaze flicked to her and softened again. "I'm sure he thinks he did." Gabe's mouth tightened. "Marin," the woman stepped forward half a step, voice controlled but cutting. "Officer, you're about to interfere with an active evidence chain." The officer turned on her. "And you're about to interfere with an arrest." He nodded to the uniforms behind him. "Cuff him." One of the officers moved toward Gabe, handcuffs already out. Marin's mind went blank with panic. The room tilted. The cameras kept rolling. The rope lay slack like a dead thing. And then, from the hatch below, a shout echoed up, muffled but urgent. "He's moving! Runner's back in the maze! He's coming up another access!" The woman's head snapped toward the hatch. The officer frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" The warning voice below came again, louder, more panicked. "He's coming up, he's—" A metal clang sounded somewhere deeper in the building. Another hatch, another door, being forced. Marin's blood turned to ice, because it meant the one who vanished into the darkness hadn't fled. He'd repositioned, and now he was climbing back into the building while everyone argued about handcuffs. The building went quiet in the worst way. Not silent, never silent, but the kind of quiet where every sound becomes a threat. A boot shifting, a radio crackle, the faint drip of water somewhere deep in Gabe's tunnels. Marin stood between two worlds, uniforms and cameras, and felt both turning on her at once. "Another access?" the lead officer repeated, frowning as if the words were nonsense. The woman with the earpiece didn't waste breath. She snapped into her mic. "All units, lock down secondary hatches. He's inside the structure. Confirm his route." Voices answered over overlapping channels. "Stairwell clear. Rear hatch compromised. No visual. Topside alley. Movement near the service corridor. Possible entry through laundry vent line." The officer's handcuffs glinted as the uniform behind him stepped closer to Gabe. Gabe didn't look at the cuffs. He looked at Marin. "Marin," he said low, urgent, like he was trying to push a truth into her with his eyes. "If he gets upstairs again, he won't come for the phone. He'll come for you." Marin's throat tightened. "Then let the police." Gabe's voice cut sharper. "Not like this." The officer snapped. "Enough! On your knees, Gabe!" The woman stepped half a step forward, eyes cold. "Officer, you're about to hand him over to the same network that sent 2 men into his building." The officer's jaw tightened. "You're making accusations." "I'm stating a pattern," she replied, "and we're recording it." The officer's gaze flicked to the camera rig again, anger simmering. "Turn it off." The cameraman didn't. The officer pointed at Marin, softening his tone like flipping a switch. "Marin, come here. Step away from them." Marin's feet didn't move. She couldn't decide whose voice was safer, because safety had been a costume all night. Then, from somewhere above, closer now, came a faint metallic scrape, not from the hatch at their feet, from the corridor behind the officers. Marin saw it first in the woman's posture, her head tilted. She listened like a dog hearing something humans missed. "Hold," she whispered to her team. The officers didn't react. They were focused on Gabe. The scrape came again, then a soft click, like a latch being tested. The woman's voice went hard. "He's here." The officer frowned. "Who's here?" The answer came without words. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, framed by flickering overhead light, wet jacket, clean posture, calm face, the pursuer. Marin's blood went ice cold. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look hunted. He looked like he belonged in the building more than anyone, like this was simply the next room he was entitled to enter. One of the uniforms lifted a flashlight. "Sir, stay where you are." The pursuer raised his hand slightly, palms open, a picture of compliance. His voice was smooth as the first time he'd spoken through the broken door. "Thank God," he said, eyes landing on the lead officer. "You got here. I've been trying to tell them. These people took my niece." Marin's stomach dropped so hard she thought she'd vomit. The officer glanced at Marin, then back at the pursuer. "Your niece?" "Yes," the pursuer said gently, stepping forward one slow pace. "She's unstable. She ran. They grabbed her, took my phone, and attacked my security. I'm begging you, please." The officer's face shifted, uncertainty, then authority trying to settle back into place. "Ma'am," he said to the woman, "step aside." The woman didn't move. He forced entry. He held her at knife point. "We have it on audio and partial video." The pursuer sighed sadly, like she was embarrassing herself. "That's not true. They're manipulating her. She's terrified." "Look at her. She's shaking." Marin realized her hands were trembling so hard her fingers wouldn't stop. The pursuer's eyes met hers, and in that look, he didn't need to say anything. The message was the same as always. "I can still reach you." Gabe's voice cut through, low and lethal. "Don't come closer." The pursuer's smile softened. "Gabe." Still playing savior. The officer snapped. "Everyone stop talking. Marin, tell me the truth. Did he kidnap you?" Marin's mouth opened. No sound. Her mind flashed images like broken glass. The knife at her ribs, the bootsteps in the tunnel, Gabe bleeding on the ladder, the calm voices on the radio, the way the pursuer said her name like it was a chain. The pursuer tilted his head, gentle. "Sweetheart, just come here. Come to me." Marin's knees went weak. The woman's hand touched Marin's shoulder, grounding. "Marin," she said quietly, not pleading, not pushing, just anchoring. "Say his name, out loud, then say what he did." Marin swallowed. Her throat burned. The officer pressed, "Marin." The pursuer's voice stayed warm. "It's okay." Gabe's eyes didn't blink. "Marin, now." Marin drew in a breath so sharp it hurt her ribs, and she spoke. "His name isn't—" Her voice cracked. She forced it stronger. "His name is—" The pursuer's smile thinned, a warning. Marin looked straight at the officer and said, "He held me at knife point. He broke in. He brought men. He called me property." Silence hit the room like a slap. The officer's expression froze, caught between procedure and the fact that a shaking teenager had just given a direct allegation on camera. The pursuer's eyes didn't flare with rage. They went flat. He took one more step forward anyway, slow, testing. The woman's team shifted instantly, subtle repositioning, angles closing. The camera kept rolling. The officer lifted a hand, trying to regain control. "Sir, stop." The pursuer stopped. For a beat. Then he smiled again, calm returning like a mask settling into place. "Officer," he said quietly, "I'm trying to cooperate, but you should know. If you don't take her now, she won't be here when your paperwork catches up." Marin felt the meaning like a knife. Not a threat to fight, a threat to disappear. The woman snapped into her mic. "He just said it. Mark that timestamp." The pursuer's gaze flicked to the camera and he seemed almost amused. Then, from the hatch below them, a shout exploded upward, raw, frantic. "He's not alone!" A crash echoed from somewhere else in the building. Another door, another barrier giving. The officer spun, startled. The pursuer used that half-second. He moved, not toward Marin, not toward Gabe, toward the side of the corridor where the lights were weakest. His hand dipped to his pocket. The woman's voice became a weapon. "Hands! Show your hands!" The pursuer didn't. A small dark object hit the floor and rolled. Marin recognized it too late. A smoke canister. It hissed, then vomited thick gray smoke that flooded the corridor in seconds, swallowing faces, swallowing cameras, swallowing certainty. People shouted. Someone coughed. Boots scraped as the formation broke. "Masks!" the woman yelled. Marin's eyes burned. She backed up, choking. Through the smoke, a hand grabbed her wrist. Hard. Marin screamed and yanked back, but the grip was iron. She couldn't see who held her. Then Gabe's voice roared, closer than it should have been. "Marin!" A body slammed into another body, a grunt, a punch, wet and heavy. Marin stumbled, coughing, trying to pull free. The grip on her wrist loosened for a fraction. She tore away and ran blindly toward the only sound she trusted, Gabe's voice. Her shoulder slammed into someone. Hands grabbed at her hoodie. She ripped free again, lungs on fire. The smoke thinned just enough for a split-second view. Gabe on his feet, swaying, blood-smeared, one hand outstretched toward her. The pursuer behind him, half hidden, moving in for Gabe's back like he was finishing a task. Marin's brain screamed. She didn't think. She grabbed the nearest thing on the floor, cold metal, heavy, someone's dropped baton or tool, and swung it with everything she had. It connected with a sickening crack against a shoulder. The figure stumbled. Gabe jerked forward. Someone cursed. The smoke swallowed them again. Marin's ears rang. Her eyes streamed. Her hands shook around the metal. Then, the woman's voice cut through the chaos, furious and clear. "Lights! Now!" A bank of harsh lights snapped on, flooding the corridor. The smoke turned translucent, and for one frozen instant, everyone could see everyone. Gabe stood between Moran and the pursuer. The pursuer's face was calm, but his eyes were no longer amused. And the lead officer, blinking in the sudden light, stared at the pursuer's hand. Because in it was not a badge, not paperwork, a second canister. And the pursuer, finally dropping the mask, whispered something that made Gabe's expression change completely. Something Marin couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears as the canister slipped from his fingers and clinked onto the floor at their feet and started to hiss.